Story 1. The Repeating Highway. Marcus Chen had been driving long-haul routes for 17 years, and Interstate 80 through Nebraska was as familiar to him as his own driveway. The stretch between North Platte and Grand Island was particularly monotonous. Flat farmland, the occasional rest stop, and mile markers that blurred together in the darkness. It was 2:47 a.m. on October 14, 2019, when Marcus first noticed something was wrong. He'd just passed mile marker 221, a spot he knew was roughly 40 minutes from his planned fuel stop in Grand Island. His GPS showed the distance as 38 miles, matching his memory perfectly. Marcus adjusted his seat, took a sip of lukewarm coffee from his thermos, and settled in for the final stretch. The CB radio crackled with occasional chatter from other drivers, mostly complaints about construction delays further east. 20 minutes passed. Marcus glanced at his GPS, expecting to see the distance shrinking. It still read 38 miles. He frowned, tapping the screen with his finger. The device was less than a year old, top of the line, and had never given him problems. He checked his speedometer. A steady 65 miles per hour, exactly where he'd maintained it. In 20 minutes at that speed, he should have covered over 20 miles. Marcus looked out the window for a landmark, anything familiar. There, a distinctive red barn with a faded mail pouch tobacco advertisement painted on the side. He'd seen that barn thousands of times. It was located about 5 miles past mile marker 221. He definitely made progress. But his GPS disagreed, and when he looked for the next mile marker, his chest tightened. Mile marker 221. He'd just passed it, again. Marcus grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Rolling Thunder. Anybody got eyes on I-80 eastbound near North Platte? I'm having some GPS issues, need a landmark confirmation." Static answered him. Then a voice, distant and distorted. "Rolling Thunder, what's your 20? Just past mile marker 221, heading toward Grand Island." More static. The voice returned, but it sounded wrong, like it was coming from very far away. "There is no mile marker 221 on this route, driver. Check your coordinates." Marcus felt sweat prickling his neck despite the air conditioning. "Negative, I'm looking right at it. Mile marker 221, I-80 eastbound." The radio went silent. Marcus tried several more times to raise someone, anyone, but got only static in response. He forced himself to breathe slowly, rationally. Equipment malfunctions happened. His GPS was glitching. Maybe the CB radio's antenna was damaged. There had to be a logical explanation. He drove for another 30 minutes, keeping his eyes fixed on the road ahead, watching for the next mile marker. His truck's digital clock seemed to be working fine. It was now 3:38 a.m. He'd been driving for 51 minutes since passing mile marker 221 the first time. At his current speed, he should be approaching Grand Island's outskirts. Instead, he passed the red barn with the mail pouch tobacco advertisement. Again. Then mile marker 221. Again. Marcus pulled over onto the shoulder, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. This wasn't possible. He opened his door and stepped out into the cool October night, grateful for the solid ground under his feet. The highway stretched in both directions, illuminated by his truck's headlights and the distant glow of stars. Everything looked normal, real. He could smell the earth, the faint scent of diesel from his exhaust, the dusty odor of dried corn stalks in nearby fields. He pulled out his cell phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here in rural Nebraska, but it added to his growing sense of wrongness. Marcus climbed back into his cab and checked his logbook. According to his entries, he'd left the truck stop in Cheyenne at 11:30 p.m. It was now 3:42 a.m., 4 hours and 12 minutes of driving time. He should be well past Grand Island by now, approaching Lincoln. He started the engine and pulled back onto the highway, determined to break whatever loop he'd fallen into. This time, he kept his eyes locked on the odometer. The numbers ticked upward steadily. 1 mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles. The truck was definitely moving forward. Distance was being covered. He passed the red barn, mile marker 221. The odometer showed he'd driven 14.3 miles. But he was back at the same spot. Marcus's breath came in short gasps. He'd heard stories from other truckers over the years, weird tales shared at rest stops and truck washes usually dismissed as road fatigue or too much caffeine. Stories about highways that led nowhere, roads that trapped travelers in endless loops, stretches of asphalt that existed outside normal space. He'd always assumed they were just urban legends, the trucker's version of ghost stories. He tried the CB radio again. "This is Rolling Thunder on I-80 eastbound. I am experiencing a serious navigation emergency. If anyone can hear this, I am stuck in some kind of loop near mile marker 221. I keep passing the same landmarks. Please respond." This time, a different voice came through, clearer than before. "Rolling Thunder, this is Nighthawk. I read you, brother. Stay calm. How many times have you passed the marker?" 4 times now, maybe 5. I've lost count. Listen carefully. When you pass it again, and you will pass it again, I need you to do something different. Don't look at it. Don't acknowledge it. Keep your eyes forward and your mind clear. Think about where you're going, not where you are. Who is this? How do you know about this? I've been where you are, friend. Just trust me. Eyes forward. Destination in mind. Don't look at the marker. The radio went silent again. Marcus wanted to ask more questions, wanted to demand answers, but some instinct told him the voice wouldn't return. He drove on, watching the road ahead. His headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, and in that tunnel, he focused on his destination. Grand Island. The fuel stop he knew well. The clerk who worked the night shift, a woman named Rosa who always had fresh coffee ready. The parking spot he usually chose on the north side where the lights weren't too bright. The red barn appeared in his peripheral vision. Marcus kept his eyes straight ahead. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at him to look, to check the mile marker, to confirm his position. He resisted. He thought about Rosa's coffee. He thought about the familiar layout of the fuel stop. He thought about the route beyond Grand Island, toward his final destination in Chicago. Minutes stretched like hours. Marcus didn't dare check his GPS or his odometer. He simply drove, maintaining his speed, keeping his focus narrowly fixed on the road immediately in front of him. The white lines blurred past. His truck's engine maintained its steady rumble. Then gradually he became aware of something changing. The landscape looked different. There were more lights in the distance. A road sign appeared in his headlights. Grand Island, 12 miles. Marcus exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His entire body was shaking. He checked his GPS. It showed him on I-80 eastbound, 12 miles from Grand Island, exactly where the sign indicated. His clock read 4:18 a.m. He'd lost approximately 36 minutes, maybe more. Time had gotten strange in that loop, and he wasn't entirely sure how long he'd been trapped. But he was out. He was moving forward again through normal space. Marcus drove straight to the fuel stop in Grand Island. Rosa was behind the counter just as always, and her coffee was fresh and hot. He didn't mention what had happened. What would he say? That he'd been caught in some kind of temporal or spatial loop on a perfectly ordinary stretch of highway. That mile marker 221 had trapped him in a repeating pattern until a mysterious voice on his CB radio told him how to escape. He fueled up, used the restroom, and walked around his truck, checking every mechanical component he could think of. Everything was fine. The truck was in perfect condition. His GPS was functioning normally. There was nothing wrong with any of his equipment. Before leaving, Marcus keyed his CB radio one more time. "Nighthawk, if you're out there, this is Rolling Thunder. I made it through, thank you." He waited but received no response. Marcus completed his delivery to Chicago without further incident, but he filed a detailed report with his company anyway, documenting everything that had happened, complete with timestamps and GPS coordinates. His dispatcher read it with obvious skepticism but didn't comment directly. 2 weeks later, Marcus learned that his route had been changed. He would no longer be running I-80 through Nebraska. When he asked why, his dispatcher was vague. Company decision. We're redistributing some routes for efficiency. But Marcus noticed something else. 3 other drivers who regularly ran I-80 had also been reassigned. He managed to track down one of them, a veteran driver named Patricia Reeves, and asked her directly if anything unusual had ever happened to her on that route. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mile marker 221? Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Yeah. It happened to me in 2015. Took me 7 loops to get out. I reported it just like you did. They reassigned me a week later." She paused. "There are others, Marcus. I've heard of at least a dozen drivers who've experienced it. Some of them never reported it because they thought they'd lose their jobs, thought people would think they were crazy, but it's real. That stretch of highway is wrong somehow. Has anyone investigated it? The company, the state, anyone? Not officially. What would they investigate? A piece of road that sometimes traps drivers in loops. Who would believe it? And the drivers who experience it always get out eventually. No crashes, no injuries, just lost time and terror. It's not enough to trigger any kind of formal inquiry. Marcus never ran I-80 through Nebraska again. He changed companies 6 months later, specifically choosing routes that kept him in the southern states. But he never forgot that night, and he never stopped wondering how many other drivers had been caught in that same loop. How many had panicked and crashed, how many had simply disappeared, forever circling past mile marker 221, unable to break free. He still monitors CB Channel 19 late at night sometimes, listening to the chatter of other long-haul drivers. And once, about a year after his experience, he heard a desperate voice calling for help. "This is anyone who can hear me. I'm stuck on I-80. I keep passing the same mile marker over and over." Marcus grabbed his radio and replied, his voice steady and calm. "Driver, this is Rolling Thunder. Listen carefully. When you pass the marker again, keep your eyes forward. Don't look at it. Think about your destination, not your position. You will get through this." He doesn't know if that driver made it out. The voice never responded. But Marcus continues to listen, and whenever he hears someone describing that particular kind of terror, he offers the same advice that once saved him. It's the only thing he can do. Some roads, Marcus has learned, exist in spaces between spaces. And once you've traveled one of them, you never quite trust any highway again. Story 2. The Missing Truck Stop. Sarah Mitchell had been driving professionally for 9 years, and she prided herself on knowing every good truck stop between Seattle and Portland like the back of her hand. On June 3, 2021, she was running her usual route southbound on I-5, hauling a load of electronics that needed to be in Eugene by morning. It was 1:15 a.m. when she started looking for the Willow Creek Travel Plaza, her favorite stop along this route. Willow Creek was located at mile marker 248, about 40 miles south of Olympia. Sarah had stopped there hundreds of times over the years. It was a well-maintained facility with clean showers, decent food, and a staff that actually remembered regular customers. The owner, a retired trucker named Bill Henderson, ran it like a family business. Sarah always parked in the back section, used the third shower on the left, and ordered the chicken sandwich from the diner if she had time. Her GPS showed Willow Creek exactly where it should be, less than 5 miles ahead. Sarah signaled and moved into the right lane, preparing for the exit. She could already picture the bright lights of the facility, the familiar layout of the parking area, Bill's welcoming wave from behind the register. Mile marker 248 passed on her right. There was no exit. Sarah frowned and checked her GPS again. The icon showed her position passing right through Willow Creek's location, but there was nothing there. Just dark highway, dense forest on both sides, and the occasional reflector marking the shoulder. She drove another mile, thinking perhaps she'd miscounted the markers, then pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. She zoomed in on her GPS map. Willow Creek Travel Plaza was clearly marked at mile marker 248, exactly where it had always been. The device showed it as operational, with fuel prices updated within the last hour. Sarah pulled out her phone and searched for the truck stop's number, which she'd called numerous times before. The phone rang. Once, twice. Then a recorded message. The number you have reached is no longer in service. No further information is available. Sarah's hands felt cold. She tried the truck stop's website. The page loaded, showing photos of the facility, a menu from the diner, and information about amenities. Everything looked normal, but when she tried to click on the directions button, she got an error message. Location data unavailable. She sat in her cab, engine idling, trying to process what was happening. Truck stops didn't just vanish. They were enormous facilities, fuel islands, buildings, parking lots. You couldn't miss one. And yet she'd driven right past where Willow Creek should be, and there had been nothing but darkness and trees. Sarah put her truck in gear and did a U-turn, heading back north. She drove slowly, carefully watching the mile markers count backward. 247, 248, 249. She was now in the exact location where Willow Creek should be. Her headlights illuminated only the empty highway and forest. She pulled over again and grabbed her CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Cascade Runner looking for any driver familiar with I-5 southbound near Olympia. Anyone know the Willow Creek Travel Plaza at mile marker 248? Static for several seconds, then a response. Cascade Runner, this is Mountain Mike. I run this route weekly. Never heard of a Willow Creek Travel Plaza. You sure you got the right highway? Sarah's stomach lurched. I've stopped there hundreds of times. Mile marker 248 I-5 southbound. Owner's name is Bill Henderson. Big facility, can't miss it. Another voice joined in. This is westbound Willie, been driving I-5 for 23 years. There's no truck stop called Willow Creek anywhere near mile marker 248. Closest facility is the Pilot at exit 242, about 6 miles south of where you're talking about. That's impossible, Sarah said, her voice cracking. I was there 3 days ago. I showered there. I ate in the diner. I talked to Bill about his granddaughter starting college. Silence on the radio. Then Mountain Mike's voice, careful and concerned. Driver, you doing okay? You sound pretty worked up. Maybe pull over and get some rest. Sarah ended the transmission without responding. Her hands were shaking. She opened her phone and scrolled through her photos. She'd taken a picture 3 days ago. She remembered because Bill's granddaughter had been visiting and Bill had insisted on a photo with one of his regular customers. She found the date, May 31st, 3 days ago. She found the photo. It showed her standing in front of her truck in what appeared to be a parking lot. But the details were wrong. The truck stop behind her was blurry, indistinct. She could make out the shape of a building, but no signage, no clear features. And Bill? Bill's face was wrong. Not deformed or monstrous, just wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. Like looking at a face in a dream where you know who it's supposed to be, but the features don't quite match. Sarah felt bile rising in her throat. She scrolled through more photos. She'd taken dozens over the years at Willow Creek. Hundreds, probably. But now, looking at them, they were all the same. Blurry buildings, indistinct figures, nothing clear enough to prove the place had ever existed. She opened her banking app and checked her fuel purchase history. Every receipt from Willow Creek was there. Dated, priced, completely documented. She had proof, but when she tried to view the detailed receipts, the images wouldn't load. Each one gave her an error message: file corrupted or unavailable. Sarah started her truck and drove south again, this time determined to reach the next truck stop she was certain existed. The pilot station at exit 242 that westbound Willie had mentioned. She needed to talk to someone, anyone who could help her understand what was happening. The pilot appeared exactly where it should be, bright and solid and real. Sarah pulled in and parked, then practically ran inside. The clerk behind the counter looked up with a professional smile. "Evening. How can I help you?" "I need to ask you about another truck stop. Willow Creek Travel Plaza. Do you know it?" The clerk's smile faltered. "I don't think I know that one. Where's it located?" "About 6 miles north of here. Mile marker 248. The clerk shook his head, slowly. "There's nothing up there but forest. Next truck stop north of us is way up past Olympia." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him her GPS, which still displayed Willow Creek's location. The clerk leaned in to look, his brow furrowing. "That's weird. I've never seen that place before. Are you sure your GPS isn't glitching?" "I've been stopping there for years," Sarah insisted. "The owner is Bill Henderson. It has a diner, showers, a big parking area in the back." The clerk's expression changed subtly, becoming guarded. "Ma'am, I've worked at this pilot for 8 years. I know every truck stop on this stretch of I-5. There's no Willow Creek. There never has been." Sarah felt the world tilting beneath her feet. She mumbled a thanks and walked back to her truck on unsteady legs. Inside her cab, she pulled up her logbook app and checked her previous stops. Willow Creek appeared in her records dozens of times. Fueling stops, rest breaks, meals, all documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates. But the coordinates, when she checked them now, showed only forest, empty land, no structures, no facilities, nothing. Sarah tried calling other drivers she knew personally, people she'd seen regularly at Willow Creek. Out of the 8 numbers she tried, 5 were disconnected. The other 3 rang endlessly without answer. She searched social media for Bill Henderson, the owner she'd chatted with so many times. No results. No one by that name connected to any truck stop anywhere. She sat in her truck until dawn, searching the internet obsessively for any mention of Willow Creek Travel Plaza. She found nothing. Not a single review, not a photo, not a forum post. It was as if the place had been completely erased from existence, except for the fragments in her own records, which were becoming increasingly corrupted. As the sun rose, Sarah forced herself to continue her route. She had a delivery to make, schedules to keep, but she couldn't stop thinking about Willow Creek. Had she imagined 9 years of stops at a non-existent truck stop? That was impossible. She had physical receipts somewhere, didn't she? She'd kept paper records for years before switching to digital. When she got home to Seattle 3 days later, Sarah went straight to her filing cabinet where she kept old logbooks and receipts. She found the folder marked Fuel Receipts 2012-2019 and pulled it out with trembling hands. The receipts from Willow Creek were there, dozens of them. But the paper felt wrong, too smooth, too thin. And the ink was fading as she watched, growing lighter and lighter until the receipts were completely blank. Just blank pieces of paper. Sarah dropped them, backing away from her filing cabinet as if it had burned her. The blank receipts fluttered to the floor, and in that moment she realized something terrifying. Willow Creek hadn't just vanished. It was being retroactively erased from existence, along with all evidence that it had ever been there. Over the next several weeks, Sarah became obsessed with finding proof. She reached out to trucking forums, posted questions on social media, even hired a private investigator to research the property at mile marker 248. The investigators' report showed that the land had been owned by the Washington State Park System for over 40 years. It was protected forest. No commercial development had ever been permitted. But Sarah remembered Bill. She remembered the taste of the chicken sandwich. She remembered the specific creak of the third shower stall door. She remembered conversations, faces, small daily interactions that couldn't possibly be false memories. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah drove back to mile marker 248. It was 2:30 a.m., dark and silent. She parked on the shoulder and walked into the forest with a flashlight, following what her GPS insisted was the access road to Willow Creek. There was no road, just trees and undergrowth that looked like it had been undisturbed for decades. She walked for 20 minutes, sweeping her flashlight back and forth, finding nothing but natural forest. No foundation remnants, no old pavement, no sign that any structure had ever existed there. She was about to turn back when her flashlight beam caught something. A small metal sign, half buried in fallen leaves. Sarah knelt and brushed it off. Willow Creek Travel Plaza, thank you for visiting. The sign was old, rusted, covered in moss. It looked like it had been there for years, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Sarah picked it up with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. Here was proof, physical proof that the place had existed. She carried the sign back to her truck and placed it carefully in the passenger seat. On the drive home, she kept glancing at it, reassuring herself it was real, it was solid, it existed. When she arrived home at 5 a.m., she carried it inside immediately, determined to document it, photograph it, preserve it. The sign was gone. She was holding nothing. Her hands were empty, though she could have absolutely sworn that she'd been carrying it just seconds before. Sarah Mitchell quit trucking 2 months later. She told her company it was for health reasons, which wasn't entirely a lie. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't trust her own memories. She would drive past any truck stop and wonder if it was real, if it would still be there on her next trip, if everyone else could see it or just her. She took a job in an office doing logistics coordination. No more long-haul driving, no more I-5. But sometimes late at night, she would pull up mapping software and zoom in on mile marker 248. And sometimes, very rarely, her GPS would glitch for just a moment, and Willow Creek Travel Plaza would appear on the map, marked as operational, with fuel prices updated within the hour. Then the glitch would resolve, and it would be gone again. Just forest, like it had always been, like it would always be. Sarah never figured out what Willow Creek really was, a place that existed between dimensions, a location that had been erased from timeline, a shared delusion among a group of drivers. She had no answers, only questions and the fading memory of a truck stop that everyone insisted had never existed. But she knows what she experienced. She knows she stopped there hundreds of times. She knows Bill Henderson's smile, knows the layout of that facility, knows it was real. Or it had been real, until it wasn't. Story 3. The Backwards Delivery. Thomas Wayne had been running regional routes for Midwest Transport for 14 years, primarily delivering automotive parts between manufacturing facilities in Michigan and Indiana. He was methodical, punctual, and had an impeccable safety record. On March 9, 2020, Thomas received a routine delivery assignment that would shatter his understanding of reality. The manifest was straightforward. Pick up a load of engine components from a facility in Detroit, deliver to a plant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Total distance, approximately 180 miles. Expected drive time, 3.5 hours, accounting for border crossing and highway conditions. Thomas had run this exact route at least 200 times before. He arrived at the Detroit facility at 6 a.m., signed the paperwork, and watched as the loading crew secured the cargo. Everything was standard. The dock supervisor, a man named Gerald who Thomas had known for years, handed him the sealed delivery confirmation envelope that would be opened and signed by the receiving facility in Fort Wayne. "Straight shot down to Fort Wayne?" Gerald asked, making small talk while Thomas did his post-loading inspection. "Always is," Thomas replied. "Should be there by 10:30 at the latest." Thomas pulled out of the Detroit facility at 6:47 a.m. and headed toward I-94. The morning was clear, traffic was light, and he settled into the familiar rhythm of the drive. His route would take him through Ann Arbor, then southeast to the Indiana border, picking up I-69 south toward Fort Wayne. He'd driven it so many times he could practically do it with his eyes closed. The first hour passed normally. Thomas listened to a podcast about World War II history, sipped coffee from his travel mug, and mentally reviewed his schedule for the rest of the week. He passed Ann Arbor at 7:52 a.m. exactly on schedule. Just past mile marker 37 on I-94, Thomas noticed his GPS acting strangely. The screen flickered, then showed his route recalculating. He wasn't concerned. GPS glitches happened frequently in this area due to the rolling terrain. But when the screen stabilized, something was wrong. The GPS now showed him traveling northwest, back toward Detroit. Thomas glanced at the road signs. They confirmed he was heading southeast on I-94, exactly as he should be. He tapped his GPS screen, trying to reset it. The device insisted he was traveling in the opposite direction, returning to his starting point. "Piece of junk," Thomas muttered, making a mental note to replace the unit. He didn't need it anyway for this familiar route. He continued driving, relying on road signs and his own knowledge of the highway. Another hour passed. Thomas should have been approaching the Indiana border. Instead, the landscape looked increasingly familiar in a wrong way. He started seeing landmarks he'd passed earlier. A distinctive barn with a red roof, a water tower painted with a high school mascot, a billboard advertising a local attorney. Thomas pulled over at the next rest area, his heart starting to pound. According to his truck's clock, it was 9:17 a.m. He'd been driving for 2.5 hours. He should be approaching Fort Wayne. Instead, he appeared to be approaching Detroit. He pulled out his phone and checked his location. The GPS on his phone matched his truck's GPS. He was approximately 30 miles west of Detroit, having apparently traveled northwest for the past 2.5 hours. This was impossible. Thomas had been watching the road. He'd seen signs for Ann Arbor, for the Indiana border. He'd been heading southeast, not northwest. There was no way he could have made a wrong turn. I-94 was a straight shot with no confusing interchanges in this direction. Thomas started his truck and pulled back onto the highway, determined to pay closer attention. He watched every road sign, every mile marker, every landmark. All of them confirmed he was heading southeast toward Indiana. His compass showed him traveling southeast. The sun was in the correct position for his direction of travel, but his GPS insisted he was going northwest. An hour and 20 minutes later, Thomas found himself pulling into the exact same rest area he'd left from. According to every piece of electronic navigation equipment in his truck, he'd driven in a complete circle and was now back where he'd started. According to his eyes, his compass, and every road sign, he'd been driving southeast the entire time. Thomas got out of his truck with shaking hands. He walked to the rest area building and found a paper map of Michigan, the kind that was increasingly rare in the age of GPS. He spread it out on a picnic table and traced his intended route with his finger. Detroit to Fort Wayne, a simple diagonal line southeast across Michigan and into Indiana. An elderly man at the next table leaned over. "Lost, son?" "Something like that," Thomas said. "I'm trying to get to Fort Wayne, Indiana. I keep driving southeast on I-94, but somehow I keep ending up back near Detroit." The man studied the map. "I-94 east will take you to Detroit, not away from it." "No, I-94 southeast goes toward Indiana." The man shook his head slowly. No, son. I-94 runs east-west through here. You want I-69 if you're heading to Fort Wayne from Detroit? Thomas stared at the map. The man was wrong. He knew this route, but the map showed exactly what the man described. I-94 ran east-west through southern Michigan. To get to Fort Wayne from Detroit, you would take I-94 west a short distance, then pick up I-69 south. That wasn't right. That wasn't how the route went. Thomas had driven it hundreds of times. You took I-94 southeast through Ann Arbor, continued southeast to the border, then took I-69 south toward Fort Wayne. Southeast first, then south, except the map showed I-94 running east-west, and Thomas's GPS agreed with the map. But every road sign he'd seen, every marker, every indication on the actual highway had shown him traveling southeast. Thomas pulled out his phone and called his dispatcher. "Ray, this is Thomas. I'm having a navigation problem with the Fort Wayne delivery." "What kind of problem? You should be there by now." "I keep ending up back near Detroit. My GPS says I'm driving the wrong direction, but the road signs say I'm going the right way." There was a long pause. "Thomas, are you feeling okay? You sound confused." "I'm not confused. Something weird is happening with this route. Can you confirm the directions for me? Detroit to Fort Wayne." "Sure. Take I-94 west to I-69, then south on I-69 to Fort Wayne. Same as always." Thomas felt cold spread through his chest. "Ray, I've never taken I-94 west for this delivery. It's always been southeast." "Thomas, I-94 doesn't run southeast from Detroit. It runs east-west. Are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe you should pull over and rest." Thomas ended the call. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. The route was wrong. The map was wrong. His dispatcher was wrong. Or Thomas was wrong, and his entire memory of hundreds of previous trips was false. He got back in his truck and pulled up his delivery logs from the past year. Every Fort Wayne trip was documented with GPS tracking. He opened the files, looking at the recorded routes. Every single one showed him taking I-94 west from Detroit, then I-69 south to Fort Wayne, west, then south. The GPS tracks were clear and unambiguous. But Thomas remembered southeast. He remembered the landmarks, the specific sequence of towns, the way the morning sun would shine through his passenger window on that stretch of road. Southeast first, then south. He sat in his truck for 40 minutes trying to reconcile his memories with the evidence. Finally, he decided to ignore his memories and follow the documented route. I-94 west, then I-69 south. Thomas started his truck and pulled onto I-94, following the signs toward Detroit. West. It felt completely wrong, like driving backward, but he forced himself to trust the GPS and the signs. He passed Ann Arbor again, this time from the opposite direction. He watched for the I-69 interchange. It appeared exactly where his GPS said it would. Thomas took the exit, merged onto I-69 southbound, and continued toward Indiana. Every sign confirmed he was heading the right direction. His GPS showed him on the correct route. The mile markers counted down appropriately. 2 hours later, Thomas pulled into the Fort Wayne facility. He'd made it finally, though he was over 4 hours late. The receiving supervisor was annoyed but accepted the delivery. Thomas handed over the sealed delivery confirmation envelope and watched as the supervisor opened it. The man's face went pale. "What the hell is this?" Thomas leaned over to look. The delivery confirmation inside the envelope, the one that had been sealed in Detroit 5 hours earlier, was already signed and dated. Signed by the Fort Wayne facility supervisor. Dated March 9th, 2020, 10:15 a.m., 4 hours earlier when Thomas had still been trapped in his loop. "I don't understand," Thomas said. The supervisor showed him the document. "This is my signature. This is our facility stamp. According to this, you delivered this load 4 hours ago." "That's impossible. I've been driving in circles all morning. I just got here." The supervisor pulled up his facility logs on a computer. "We received a delivery from Midwest Transport at 10:15 this morning. Truck number 2847, that's you, isn't it?" Thomas looked at his truck number, painted on the cab. 2847. "Let me check the cargo," the supervisor said, sounding shaken. He walked to the dock where Thomas's trailer was being unloaded. The crew had just opened the doors. The trailer was empty. Not just empty, pristinely clean, like it had been washed and had never carried cargo at all. "Where's the load?" the supervisor demanded. Thomas couldn't speak. He pushed past the supervisor and climbed into the trailer himself, running his hands over the floor. Nothing. No shipping bands, no tie-down marks, no evidence that cargo had ever been loaded. But Thomas had watched it being loaded. He'd inspected it himself. Gerald had signed off on it. Thomas drove back to Detroit in a daze, violating every regulation about driving while impaired by emotional distress. When he arrived at the original facility, Gerald was just ending his shift. "Thomas, what are you doing back here?" "The load, the one I picked up this morning, what happened to it?" Gerald looked confused. "You delivered it to Fort Wayne. We got the confirmation at 10:15 this morning. Everything was fine." "Gerald, I just got back from Fort Wayne. The trailer was empty, but they have my signature on a delivery confirmation from 4 hours ago." Gerald pulled out his phone and showed Thomas an email. It was the scanned delivery confirmation showing Thomas's signature and the Fort Wayne facility stamp, timed at 10:15 a.m. "But I didn't deliver it until after 2, Thomas insisted. "Your GPS log says different." Gerald pulled up the tracking system. "You left here at 6:47 a.m. and arrived in Fort Wayne at 10:13 a.m. Straightforward delivery. 3 hours, 26 minutes total travel time." Thomas looked at the GPS tracking data. It showed a clean route, I-94 west, I-69 south, straight to Fort Wayne, with no deviations, no loops, no rest stops. But Thomas had stopped. He'd pulled over, studied a map, called his dispatcher. He'd spent hours trapped in a loop, driving what he thought was southeast but was actually taking him in circles. Or had he? Over the next several weeks, Thomas tried to piece together what had happened. He interviewed Gerald, his dispatcher, the Fort Wayne supervisor. All of them had consistent records showing a normal delivery on March 9th. Thomas had picked up a load, driven a standard route, and delivered it on time. But Thomas remembered something different. He remembered hours of disorientation, of driving in circles, of discovering his route memories didn't match reality. He remembered the empty trailer. He remembered the pre-signed delivery confirmation. The only physical evidence of his experience was a gap in his memory of the actual delivery. According to everyone else, Thomas had delivered the load at 10:15 a.m. But Thomas had no memory of that delivery. His memories picked up at the rest area around 9:15 a.m., then continued through his confused afternoon until he'd arrived in Fort Wayne after 2 p.m. 4 to 5 hours were simply missing from his personal timeline, replaced by memories of being lost and confused. Thomas requested the security footage from the Fort Wayne facility, showing his delivery that morning. The company provided it reluctantly. Thomas watched himself, definitely himself, same truck, same clothes, pull up at 10:13 a.m. back into the loading dock and oversee the unloading. The Thomas in the video looked normal, calm, professional. He signed the delivery confirmation, chatted briefly with the dock crew, and drove away. Thomas had no memory of any of that. He went to a doctor, fearing early onset dementia or some kind of neurological event. The tests came back normal, his brain was fine. There was no medical explanation for missing hours or false memories. Thomas continued driving for 6 more months, but his confidence was shattered. Every delivery filled him with anxiety. What if he had more missing time? What if his memories stopped matching reality again? He became obsessed with documenting everything, photos, videos, audio recordings of his entire day. But the incident never repeated. Every delivery was normal, straightforward, exactly as records indicated. In September 2020, Thomas requested a transfer to local routes only, deliveries within a 50-mile radius where he could return home each night. His company accommodated him, noting in his file that he'd requested the change for personal reasons. Thomas never told anyone the full truth of what he believed had happened. That somehow, on March 9, 2020, he'd become unstuck from the normal flow of time. That he'd delivered his load in one timeline while simultaneously experiencing a completely different series of events in another. That for several hours he'd existed in two states simultaneously, successfully, completing his delivery while also being lost in a loop. He had no explanation for how or why. He only knew that the route he remembered didn't match the route everyone else agreed he'd driven, and somewhere, in some version of events, there was a Thomas Wayne who never experienced confusion, who drove straight to Fort Wayne and made a routine delivery. But this Thomas, the one who remembered being lost, who remembered the empty trailer and the pre-signed documents, had to live with the knowledge that reality was far more unstable than he'd ever imagined. He never took another long-haul route, and he never ever drove that route to Fort Wayne again. Story 4. The Hitchhiker Who Knew. Daniel Reeves had a strict personal policy: never pick up hitchhikers. 22 years of professional driving had taught him that no good came from stopping for strangers on the highway. But on August 17, 2018, at 3:33 a.m. on a desolate stretch of Highway 50 through Nevada, the so-called loneliest road in America, Daniel broke his rule for the first and last time. He was westbound, hauling a refrigerated trailer full of pharmaceuticals from Kansas City to Sacramento. The highway stretched empty in all directions, just endless darkness and the occasional glimpse of distant mountains under starlight. Daniel had been driving for 6 hours since his last rest stop, and fatigue was beginning to set in despite the coffee and energy drinks he'd consumed. That's when his headlights caught the figure standing on the shoulder. A man, maybe in his 60s, wearing jeans and a heavy coat despite the warm August night. He wasn't actively trying to flag down traffic, just standing there with his hands in his pockets as if waiting patiently for something inevitable. What struck Daniel most was the man's complete stillness. No shivering, no shifting weight, no visible breath despite the cold desert night at elevation. Daniel's first instinct was to drive past. Keep rolling, stay safe, maintain his rule. But something made him slow down. Later, he'd struggle to explain what. Some combination of the man's peculiar stillness, the absolute emptiness of the highway, and a strange compulsion that seemed to come from outside himself. Daniel pulled onto the shoulder about 50 yards past the man and stopped. In his mirrors, he watched the figure begin walking toward the truck with an unhurried, steady pace. Daniel unlocked the passenger door but kept the truck in gear, ready to accelerate if necessary. The man climbed into the cab with surprising agility for his apparent age. Up close, his features were difficult to focus on. Not blurred exactly, but somehow indistinct, as if Daniel's eyes kept sliding away from direct observation. The man settled into the passenger seat and pulled the door closed with a soft click. "Thank you for stopping," the man said. His voice was clear and oddly accentless, without any regional markers. "Not many people drive this road at this hour." "Where you headed?" Daniel asked, pulling back onto the highway. "Same direction as you. I'll know when we reach it." It was a strange answer, but Daniel let it go. He was immediately struck by an unusual sensation. The cab felt different with this passenger present. The air seemed thicker, more charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. The dashboard lights appeared slightly off-color, taking on a greenish tint that hadn't been there moments before. "Truck breakdown?" Daniel asked, trying to make conversation to ease his discomfort. Something like that. The man turned to look at Daniel directly, and for just a moment Daniel saw his face clearly. The eyes were wrong, not the color or shape, but something about them suggested they were seeing more than they should, perceiving dimensions or layers of reality that remained hidden from normal sight. Daniel returned his attention to the road, suddenly very aware of his heart rate increasing. "You have a name?" "You can call me Marcus, and you're Daniel Reeves, 47 years old, married to Sandra for 19 years. You have a daughter, Emily, who's currently studying marine biology at UC San Diego. You're worried about her student loans. You're also worried about the pain in your left shoulder that you haven't told Sandra about." Daniel nearly swerved off the road. "How the hell do you know that?" "I know quite a lot about you, Daniel. I know you've been driving professionally since you were 25. I know about the accident in 2009 that nearly ended your career, the black ice outside of Billings. I know you still have nightmares about it, about the family and the sedan you almost couldn't avoid. Stop it." Daniel's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "Stop it right now. Who are you? How do you know these things?" Marcus leaned back in the seat, seemingly relaxed. "I'm someone who exists outside the normal flow of events. Think of me as an observer from a slightly different angle of reality. From where I stand, your entire life is visible. Past, present, and future. It's all happening simultaneously. That's not possible. Many things that aren't possible happen anyway, Daniel. You're going to understand that very soon." Marcus pointed ahead at the empty highway. "In approximately 4 miles, you're going to see something unusual. I want you to stay calm and keep driving." Daniel considered pulling over and forcing the man out of his truck. But something, curiosity or that same strange compulsion that had made him stop in the first place, kept him driving. 4 miles. He watched the odometer counting down the tenths. 3.8 miles. 3.5 miles. 3.0 miles. At exactly 2.7 miles past where he'd picked up Marcus, Daniel's headlights illuminated something impossible on the highway ahead. There was a truck stopped in the middle of the road, not on the shoulder, but blocking the entire westbound lane. Daniel's truck, his exact truck, same company, logo, same number, 2614. The cab door was open, the interior lights on, but no driver was visible. Daniel slammed on his brakes, his rig shuddering as he fought to control the deceleration. He stopped about 30 feet from the obstacle, engine rumbling, every muscle in his body tense. "What is that?" Daniel whispered. "That's you," Marcus said calmly. "Or more precisely, that's you in approximately 2 hours from now. You're looking at your own future." Daniel turned to stare at Marcus. "That's insane." "Is it? Look closer." Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the stopped truck ahead. The license plate matched his exactly. The small dent in the front bumper that he'd gotten in a parking lot 3 weeks ago was there. Even the air freshener hanging from the mirror appeared identical. "How are you doing this? Hologram? Some kind of projection?" "I'm not doing anything, Daniel. This is simply what's here. Time isn't as linear as you experience it. Sometimes, under specific conditions, it folds back on itself. You're looking at a temporal overlap, a moment from your future intersecting with your present. If that's my truck in 2 hours, where am I? Where's the driver?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's the important question, isn't it? Would you like to find out?" Every instinct screamed at Daniel to say no, to throw this strange passenger out of his truck and drive in the opposite direction as fast as possible. But he heard himself say, "Yes, then drive forward. Go around your future self." Daniel put the truck in gear and carefully steered around the stopped vehicle, using the shoulder to get past. As he drew alongside the stopped truck, he could see into the cab. The driver's seat was empty. The truck was running, lights on, everything apparently functional. But no driver. As Daniel pulled past and returned to the highway, he checked his mirrors. The stopped truck was gone. The highway behind him was completely empty. "What the hell is happening?" Daniel's voice was shaking. "You're seeing the topology of time, Daniel. Most people move through it in one direction, experiencing each moment sequentially. But time doesn't actually work that way. It's more like a landscape that you're walking through. You normally follow a path, but sometimes you can see other parts of the landscape, past and future, if you know where to look. Why are you showing me this? Because in approximately 90 minutes, you're going to have a choice to make. A very important choice. And I'm here to help you understand what's at stake." Daniel drove in silence for several minutes, his mind racing. Finally, he asked, "What choice?" "You're going to experience a catastrophic tire failure. The right rear outer tire on your trailer is going to blow. When it happens, you'll lose control of the vehicle. The way you react in the next few seconds after the blowout will determine whether you survive. If you know it's going to happen, why can't we prevent it? I can pull over right now, check the tires, replace the bad one." "Because it's already happened, Daniel. From the perspective of timeline structure, your tire has already blown. You've already reacted. I'm not here to change events, I can't do that. I'm here to prepare you for what's coming, so that when it happens, you make the right choice." "What right choice? What am I supposed to do?" Marcus turned to look at Daniel with those unsettling eyes. "When the tire blows, your instinct will be to brake hard and pull right toward the shoulder. Don't do that. This particular stretch of highway has a steep embankment on the right side. If you pull right, you'll roll the truck. You'll survive, but you'll be seriously injured. Crushed vertebrae, permanent nerve damage. You'll never drive professionally again." Daniel felt ice in his veins. "And if I don't pull right?" "You pull left instead. Use the center median. It's graded more gently. You'll maintain better control. The truck will sustain damage, but you'll walk away unharmed. That's the choice, instinct or knowledge, right or left." "How do you know this? How can you possibly know how I'll react to something that hasn't happened yet?" "Because I'm standing outside your timeline, Daniel. I can see both possibilities. The version where you pull right and the version where you pull left. I'm here to ensure you choose the left because that's the version where you survive intact." Daniel wanted to argue, to demand proof, to insist this was all some elaborate hoax. But he remembered the stopped truck, identical to his own, empty and ghost-like on the highway. He remembered Marcus knowing things about his life that no stranger could know. "Why me?" Daniel asked quietly. "Why are you helping me?" "Because in the version where you survive uninjured, you go on to do something important. Your daughter Emily, she's going to face a crisis in 3 years. A serious one. You'll be the one who helps her through it. But only if you're healthy, only if you're whole. The version of you with crushed vertebrae won't have the strength or mobility to be there for her the way she needs." "What kind of crisis?" "I can't tell you that. Some knowledge of future events can be shared safely. Other knowledge would change your behavior in ways that create worse outcomes. You need to meet Emily's crisis with fresh eyes, without preconception. But trust me, she needs her father at full strength." Daniel drove on, watching the highway ahead with new anxiety. Every mile brought him closer to the moment Marcus had described. Part of him wanted to pull over right now, refused to continue. But Marcus had said it was already happening, already part of the timeline. Could he really avoid it? "What if I stop?" Daniel asked. "What if I just pull over and wait for morning? Then the blowout happens tomorrow night instead, in a more dangerous location. The event is fixed, Daniel. The only variable is how you respond. I don't understand how any of this works. If the future is already determined, how do I have a choice? The future isn't determined, it's probable. There are multiple versions, multiple branches. Most of them are very similar, differing only in tiny details. But sometimes there are critical junction points where the branches diverge significantly. This is one of those points. Both futures exist right now, in potential. Your choice will determine which one becomes real. This is impossible, Daniel whispered. People don't work like this. Time doesn't work like this. And yet here I am. Here we are. You've already seen your own truck from the future. You know this is real, Daniel. Your rational mind is fighting it, but your intuition understands. They drove for another 30 minutes in near silence. Marcus occasionally pointed out landmarks, describing what would happen at each location in various timeline branches. An exit ramp where Daniel would stop for coffee in one version, drive past in another. A rest area where he'd meet another driver who'd become a friend, but only in certain timeline variations. You talk about time like it's all happening at once, Daniel said eventually. Because it is. Your consciousness experiences it sequentially, moment by moment. But from a higher dimensional perspective, your entire life exists as a complete structure. Birth to death, all present simultaneously. I can see that structure. I can move through it in ways you can't. Are you human? Marcus smiled, and for just a moment his features solidified into something completely human and normal. A kind face, wise and sad. I was human once. Now I'm something else. Something that happens to people who learn to see time the way I do. It changes you, Daniel. It makes you less anchored to the sequential experience of life. That sounds lonely. It is profoundly so. That's why I try to help when I can, when the timelines allow it. Small interventions carefully chosen, helping people make better choices at critical junctions. Daniel's GPS showed they were now 40 miles past where he'd picked up Marcus. The highway remained empty, just endless darkness and the rhythmic thrum of his truck's engine. It's going to happen soon, Marcus said quietly. Within the next 3 miles, the tire has a manufacturing defect, a weak spot in the sidewall. The extended driving has heated it to the point where it's about to fail. Daniel's heart was pounding. His hands were sweaty on the wheel. Every nerve in his body was tensed, waiting for the explosion he knew was coming. When you hear the blowout, you'll have about 2 seconds of good steering control before the trailer starts to pull. That's your window. Don't brake hard. Just ease off the throttle and steer left. Use the median. Trust the truck's weight and momentum to carry you through. What if I can't do it? What if my instincts take over? Then I'll have failed and you'll wake up in a hospital with a very different future. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're stronger than your instincts, Daniel. I think you can make the right choice. 2 miles passed, then another half mile. Then Daniel heard it. A sound like a gunshot, followed immediately by the violent shimmy of his trailer starting to swing. Time seemed to slow. Every lesson from 22 years of professional driving flooded his mind, all of it screaming at him to brake and pull right, to get to the shoulder, to stop. But he heard Marcus's voice, calm and certain. Left, Daniel. Trust me. Daniel eased off the throttle and steered left. The truck responded sluggishly, fighting him as the blown tire destroyed traction on the right side. He felt the trailer swinging wide, felt the horrible instability of a rig losing control. Every muscle in his body fought to pull the wheel right, toward the shoulder, toward what felt like safety. He steered left instead. The truck's front wheels crossed into the median, and Daniel felt the slight downward grade Marcus had described. The truck was still wildly unstable, but the gentler slope gave him more control than a hard brake would have. He fought the wheel, maintaining his leftward pull, letting the truck's momentum carry it into the median rather than against it. Seconds felt like hours. The truck shuddered and swayed, groaning with stress. Then gradually the momentum began to bleed off. The trailer stopped swinging. The truck settled into the median grass, rolling to a stop at an angle, damaged but upright. Daniel sat in silence, breathing hard, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. He turned to Marcus, ready to thank him, ready to demand more answers. The passenger seat was empty. Marcus was gone, as if he'd never been there. The cab felt normal again, the air pressure regular, the dashboard lights their usual color. Daniel looked in his mirrors on the floor in the sleeper berth. No sign of his mysterious passenger. Daniel climbed out of the truck on unsteady legs and walked back to inspect the damage. The right rear outer tire on his trailer was completely destroyed, shredded rubber scattered across the median. The wheel assembly was damaged. The truck would need serious repairs before it could move again. But Daniel was unharmed, not a scratch. His back felt fine, no pain, no injury, no crushed vertebrae. He called for roadside assistance and waited as dawn began to break over the Nevada desert. While he waited, Daniel walked along the median, looking back at where he'd lost control. If he'd pulled right instead of left, he would have gone down a steep embankment, just as Marcus had warned. The truck would almost certainly have rolled, but he'd pulled left, and he was fine. Over the following days, as Daniel filed reports and his truck was repaired, he tried to make sense of what had happened. He checked the security footage from his truck's cab camera, hoping to see evidence of Marcus. The footage showed Daniel driving alone the entire night. The passenger seat remained empty. There was no indication that anyone had ever been in the truck with him. Yet Daniel remembered the conversation clearly. He remembered Marcus's face, his voice, the specific details he'd shared. He remembered seeing his own truck stopped on the highway ahead, empty and ghost-like. Most importantly, he remembered Marcus's warning about Emily, that in 3 years she would need him at full strength. Daniel kept that knowledge close, never sharing it with Sandra or Emily. He waited, healthy and whole, ready for whatever crisis was coming. It arrived exactly 3 years later, in August 2021. Emily was diagnosed with leukemia, requiring aggressive treatment and intensive family support. Daniel was able to be there for every appointment, every difficult day, providing the physical and emotional strength his daughter needed. The doctor said Emily's prognosis was good thanks to early detection and strong family support. She would survive, she would thrive. And Daniel knew with absolute certainty that Marcus had been real, that he'd been given a gift, the knowledge to make one critical choice that had preserved his health and allowed him to be the father his daughter needed. He never saw Marcus again. He never found any explanation for what the man truly was or how he'd done what he'd done. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Daniel finds himself looking at the shoulder, wondering if he'll see that still figure waiting patiently in the darkness. So far, the shoulder has remained empty. But Daniel watches anyway, ready to stop again if needed, ready to receive whatever impossible knowledge might save another life at another critical junction. Because he knows now that time is stranger than anyone imagines. And sometimes, when the timeline allows it, impossible angels appear to help us make the choices that matter most. Story 5. The radio station that played tomorrow. Jennifer Parks had been hauling freight across the Southwest for 11 years, and during those years she'd developed certain routines to combat the loneliness of long-distance driving. One of her favorites was finding local AM radio stations. The stranger and more obscure, the better. She loved stumbling across small-town stations playing music from decades past, or community talk shows discussing local politics in tiny desert towns. It made the empty highways feel less isolating. On November 23, 2017, Jennifer was driving through western Arizona on Highway 93 heading north toward Las Vegas with a load of restaurant equipment. It was 11:47 p.m. and she'd been scanning through AM frequencies trying to find something more interesting than static. Most of the stations had signed off for the night, leaving just white noise across most of the dial. Then, at 8:40 a.m., she found something. A clear, strong signal. A professional-sounding broadcaster with a deep, smooth voice was reading what sounded like news headlines. And in Washington today, the Senate voted 49-51 against the infrastructure bill, effectively killing the legislation for this session. President Walsh expressed disappointment but vowed to reintroduce a revised version next quarter. Jennifer frowned. President Walsh? The current president was Donald Trump. Who the hell was President Walsh? The broadcaster continued. In international news, the European coalition announced a breakthrough in their negotiations with Russia over Arctic shipping lanes. General Secretary Volkov called the agreement a new chapter in East-West cooperation. Meanwhile, tensions continue to rise in the South China Sea following yesterday's incident involving a Taiwanese cargo vessel. Jennifer turned up the volume. The broadcast sounded completely legitimate, professional, detailed, exactly like any standard news program. But the content was wrong. President Walsh didn't exist. She'd never heard of a European coalition in the context described. General Secretary Volkov? Russia hadn't had a general secretary since the Soviet era. The news segment ended, and upbeat music played, a pop song Jennifer had never heard before, with a catchy melody and lyrics about summer nights. Then the broadcaster returned. That was Forever Golden by Samantha Cole, still holding at number 3 on the Billboard charts after 7 weeks. Coming up after the break, we'll have sports scores, including tonight's surprising upset in the NBA Finals. Jennifer checked the station frequency again. 8:40 a.m. She picked up her phone and tried to search for information about the station, but she was in a dead zone with no cell signal. She'd have to wait until she reached the next town. The commercial break started. The first ad was for a car dealership in Phoenix, advertising 2018 models with revolutionary hydrogen fuel cell technology. The second ad was for a movie Jennifer had never heard of. See Quantum Dawn, starring Michael Fassbender and Zhao Wei, in theaters this Friday. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. Something was very wrong with this radio station. The broadcaster returned. Welcome back to KWX News Radio Phoenix. I'm David Chen, and it's 11:53 p.m. on Friday, November 23, 2018. Let's get to those sports scores. The date was wrong. It was 2017, not 2018. Jennifer checked her truck's clock. 11:52 p.m., November 23, 2017. She checked her watch. Same date and time. But the radio station was broadcasting from November 23, 2018, exactly 1 year in the future. Jennifer pulled over at the next rest area, her hands shaking slightly. This had to be some kind of prank or hoax. Maybe an elaborate Halloween setup that someone had left running. But it was late November, not Halloween. And the production quality was too high, too professional for a simple prank. She kept the radio tuned to 8:40 a.m. and grabbed a notebook from her bag. If this was really somehow broadcasting from the future, she wanted to document everything. She started writing down the details, names, events, dates, anything specific that could be verified later. The sports segment was particularly detailed. In a stunning upset, the Miami Heat defeated the Houston Rockets 104-98 in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, securing their first championship since 2013. LeBron James, in what he announced would be his final season, scored 41 points. Jennifer wrote it all down. LeBron James retiring after the 2017-2018 season wasn't public knowledge. If this prediction came true, it would be significant confirmation. The broadcast continued for another hour. Jennifer listened to weather forecasts for cities across Arizona, clear skies, temperatures in the mid-60s, traffic reports for Phoenix rush hour the following morning, and another news segment covering a variety of topics she'd never heard of. Then at 12:53 a.m., the broadcaster said something that made Jennifer's blood run cold. And in tragic news, authorities in Nevada are still searching for Jennifer Parks, a long-haul truck driver who disappeared last night while traveling through western Arizona. Parks, 43, was last seen at a rest area on Highway 93, approximately 30 miles south of Wickenburg. Her truck was found abandoned at the rest area with the engine still running, but Parks herself has vanished without a trace. Anyone with information is asked to contact. Jennifer's notebook fell from her hands. That was her. The radio was reporting her own disappearance, a disappearance that would apparently happen tonight at the rest area where she was currently parked. She looked around the rest area with new terror. It was nearly empty, just her truck and a single RV parked at the far end of the lot. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across the pavement. The desert night was silent except for the distant hum of highway traffic. Jennifer's instinct was to start her truck and leave immediately. But something made her keep listening. The broadcaster continued. Parks's family has expressed confusion over the disappearance, stating that she was an experienced driver with no history of depression or personal troubles. Her truck's GPS log shows no deviation from her planned route. Investigators are treating the case as a potential abduction, though no witnesses have come forward and no signs of struggle were found at the scene. Jennifer felt like she couldn't breathe. She was listening to a news report about her own future disappearance, a disappearance that would happen in the next few minutes if she stayed here. She started her truck immediately, pulling out of the rest area without bothering with her standard pre-drive inspection. She merged back onto Highway 93, driving north, putting distance between herself and the location where she would apparently vanish. But the radio station continued broadcasting. She couldn't bring herself to turn it off, some morbid curiosity compelling her to keep listening for more information about her fate. At 1:07 a.m., another update. Breaking news in the Jennifer Parks disappearance. Nevada State Police have just announced that they've found Parks's truck approximately 15 miles north of the original rest area. The truck was pulled over on the shoulder of Highway 93 with its hazard lights on. Like the previous scene, there was no sign of Parks herself and no indication of what might have happened to her. 15 miles north. Jennifer checked her GPS. She was currently about 12 miles north of the rest area. In 3 more miles, apparently, she would pull over and vanish. Jennifer pressed harder on the accelerator. Maybe she could outrun the prediction. If she just kept driving, if she never pulled over, she could avoid the fate the radio was describing. But even as she thought it, she felt something strange happening. Her right hand was moving toward the hazard light button without her consciously directing it. Her foot was easing off the accelerator. Her truck was slowing down, drifting toward the shoulder. "No!" Jennifer shouted, fighting her own body. But her hands and feet weren't responding to her will. She was pulling over, activating her hazard lights, putting the truck in park, all against her conscious intention. She was a passenger in her own body, watching herself enact the exact scenario the radio had described. Jennifer tried to scream, tried to fight, but her body was frozen. She sat in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, unable to move or speak. Through her windshield, she saw something approaching from the desert, a figure, or maybe several figures, backlit by starlight in a way that made them difficult to see clearly. The radio was still broadcasting. David Chen's voice continued calmly. Authorities remain baffled by the circumstances of Parks's disappearance. Her truck showed no mechanical problems, and Parks herself had no known enemies or personal issues. The case joins a small but troubling cluster of similar disappearances along Arizona highways over the past decade, all involving experienced drivers vanishing under mysterious circumstances. The figures were closer now. Jennifer could almost make out details, though her paralyzed eyes couldn't quite focus properly. They moved with an odd gliding motion, not quite walking. Then, just as the figures reached her truck, the radio broadcast was interrupted by a burst of static. When the signal cleared, a different voice was speaking. A woman's voice, younger, urgent. "Jennifer, if you can hear this, you need to fight. You're caught in a probability loop. The broadcast you've been hearing isn't the future. It's a predictive model designed to make you comply with your own disappearance. Don't believe what you're hearing. Don't accept the scenario. Fight it!" Jennifer felt a surge of will. The paralysis cracked slightly. She managed to move one finger, then another. The figures outside her truck had stopped, as if sensing her resistance. The woman's voice continued. "The broadcast is using predictive psychology to override your free will. It's describing events that will only happen if you believe them and comply. You can break the loop, move your body, start your truck, drive." Jennifer poured every ounce of will into her right hand. Slowly, painfully, fighting resistance that felt like pushing through thick molasses, she moved her hand from the steering wheel to the gear shift. The figures outside her truck were moving again, faster now, seeming to sense they were losing control. "That's it, Jennifer, keep fighting. The broadcast is breaking down, they're losing their grip on you." With enormous effort, Jennifer shifted the truck into drive. Her foot found the accelerator. The truck lurched forward slowly at first, then gaining speed. In her mirror, she saw the figures receding, dissolving like smoke in the wind. The radio erupted in static, angry and chaotic. Then abruptly it went silent. Jennifer drove for 20 minutes straight, not slowing down, not looking back, her heart pounding and tears streaming down her face. When she finally felt safe enough to pull over, she was in the outskirts of Wickenburg, under bright streetlights with other vehicles around. She turned off the radio and sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. She'd been minutes away from disappearing, from becoming another unsolved mystery on a desert highway. Only the intervention of the woman's voice on the radio, someone or something that had broken through the predictive broadcast, had saved her. Jennifer pulled out her phone, now showing signal, and immediately called 911. She reported what had happened, though she struggled to make it sound coherent. The dispatcher was skeptical but promised to send a patrol car to check on her. While waiting, Jennifer tried to find the radio station again. She scanned through the AM dial repeatedly, but 8:40 AM now showed only static. The station was gone, as if it had never existed. The police arrived and took her statement. They were professional, but clearly thought she'd experienced some kind of hallucination or mental break. They checked her truck, found no evidence of any attempted abduction or unusual activity. They suggested she get some rest before continuing her journey. Jennifer completed her delivery to Las Vegas later that morning, then immediately drove home to Tucson. She filed a detailed report with her company documenting everything that had happened. She expected to be dismissed as crazy, but instead, her safety coordinator looked troubled. "Ms. Parks, you're the third driver this year to report something similar. Strange radio broadcasts, predictions, near disappearances on Arizona highways. We've been documenting these incidents, but we don't have any explanation." 3 others? Jennifer felt validation mixed with horror. What happened to them? They reported experiences similar to yours, radio stations that shouldn't exist, broadcasts that seemed designed to manipulate them into specific actions. 2 of them were able to resist like you did. The third? The coordinator paused. He didn't. He's been missing since May. His truck was found on Highway 93, about 40 miles south of where you had your experience. Jennifer felt sick. And nobody's investigating this? Nobody's trying to figure out what's happening? We've reported it to various authorities, but what do we report? That there's a phantom radio station predicting and possibly causing disappearances. Nobody takes it seriously. There's no physical evidence, no crime scene, nothing concrete to investigate. Jennifer took a month off from driving. She saw a therapist trying to process the trauma of nearly vanishing into whatever fate had been waiting for her. The therapist suggested sleep deprivation and highway hypnosis could create vivid hallucinations. But Jennifer knew what she'd experienced was real. She eventually returned to driving, but she developed strict new personal rules. Never drive alone through Arizona at night. Never scan AM radio frequencies while on remote highways, and always stay in areas with good cell phone coverage where she could call for help if needed. She also bought a small audio recorder that she kept running throughout her drives, documenting everything. Insurance against future denials, proof that these experiences were real. 3 months after her incident, Jennifer received an anonymous email at her personal address. No sender information, no subject line. The message contained only a single paragraph. You broke free from the probability trap. Well done. There are others like you, drivers who've resisted the broadcasts and survived. We're trying to understand what's happening on these highways. If you're willing to help, reply to this message. Don't trust official channels. Don't report this to authorities. The phenomenon is bigger than law enforcement can handle. Jennifer stared at the email for a long time before deciding to reply. That decision led her into a strange underground network of drivers who'd experienced similar encounters. Phantom broadcasts, predictive announcements, attempts to manipulate them into specific actions that would lead to their disappearances. The network had no answers, only theories. Some believed it was an alien phenomenon, attempts to harvest humans for unknown purposes. Others thought it was something even stranger, breaks in causality, places where the future was reaching back to ensure its own occurrence. Jennifer never learned the truth, but she became part of a quiet community dedicated to warning other drivers, to helping them resist when they encountered the broadcasts. She learned that the phenomenon wasn't limited to Arizona. Similar reports came from highways across the Southwest, all involving AM radio stations that shouldn't exist, all describing futures that would only occur if the listeners believed them. She still drives professionally, though she'll never be completely comfortable on remote highways at night, and she keeps her radio off, always refusing to scan for stations. Because somewhere out there on frequencies that exist between frequencies, broadcasts are still airing, still predicting disappearances, still trying to make them happen. And Jennifer Parks knows that the only defense is to refuse to listen, to refuse to believe, to keep driving no matter what voices promise or threaten from the speakers. Reality, she's learned, is more fragile than anyone wants to believe. And sometimes the future tries to make itself inevitable by convincing you it already is. The only way to survive is to remember that nothing is certain until it happens. And even predictions that sound like news reports can be lies designed to trap you in your own fate. Story 6. The Cargo That Watched Back. Raymond Ray Delacroix had been hauling freight for 19 years, and in that time he'd learned one fundamental truth about the job. Never ask what you're carrying. The manifest would tell you machine parts or industrial equipment or manufactured goods, and that was all you needed to know. Asking questions was the fastest way to lose contracts and earn a reputation as difficult. So Ray never asked. On January 15, 2019, Ray accepted a rush delivery job with unusual specifications. The pickup was at a nondescript warehouse in rural Pennsylvania, and the delivery destination was a research facility outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The pay was exceptional, nearly triple his normal rate for the distance. The only unusual requirement was that the trailer had to remain sealed for the entire journey. with no stops except for mandatory rest periods at specific pre-approved locations. Ray arrived at the Pennsylvania warehouse at 6:00 a.m. The facility was surrounded by high fences and security cameras, which wasn't necessarily unusual for valuable cargo. What was unusual was the way the loading crew worked, quickly, silently, with an efficiency that suggested military training. They wore heavy gloves and full coverage clothing despite the relatively mild winter morning. The cargo consisted of 12 identical crates, each about 4 feet square, made of some kind of metallic alloy Ray didn't recognize. They were loaded with extreme care, secured with specialized straps, and positioned in a very specific arrangement within the trailer. Once loading was complete, 2 technicians sealed the trailer doors with what looked like military-grade locks and tamper-proof sensors. A supervisor handed Ray a tablet with detailed route instructions and the locations of approved rest stops. "Mr. Delacroix, it's crucial that you maintain climate control in the trailer at exactly 58 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire journey. The monitoring system will alert us if temperature deviates more than 2 degrees in either direction. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. But can I ask what requires such specific—" "No," the supervisor interrupted firmly. "You can't. Just maintain the temperature and stay on schedule. You'll be monitored throughout the journey. If you experience any problems, mechanical issues, accidents, anything, you call this number immediately." He handed Ray a card with a phone number. "Only this number. Don't call 911. Don't call your regular dispatch. This number only." Ray accepted the instructions, though his instincts were sending warning signals. Something about this job felt wrong, but the pay was too good to refuse, and he'd signed a contract that included significant penalties for backing out. He pulled out of the facility at 6:47 a.m. and headed west on I-80. The first few hours were routine. Ray monitored the trailer temperature carefully, keeping it precisely at 58 degrees. The truck's GPS was synced with the route provided on the tablet, and he followed it exactly. Around 10:30 a.m., as Ray was crossing into Ohio, he began to hear sounds from the trailer. At first, he assumed it was normal cargo shifting, the kind of sounds any truck makes as it travels over uneven road surfaces. But these sounds were different, rhythmic, almost deliberate, like something tapping against the inside of the trailer in a pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Ray turned down his radio, listening more carefully. The tapping continued, consistent and purposeful. It wasn't the random noise of cargo shifting, it was intentional. Ray picked up the phone to call the number he'd been given, then hesitated. What would he say? That he heard tapping. They'd probably dismiss it as normal transport sounds. And maybe it was. Maybe the crates contained machinery with moving parts that were vibrating during transport. He put the phone down and continued driving. But the tapping didn't stop. Over the next hour, it actually increased in frequency and volume. By noon, as Ray stopped at an approved rest area outside of Indianapolis, the sounds had evolved into something more disturbing. A combination of tapping, scraping, and what almost sounded like breathing. Ray walked around his trailer during his rest stop, checking the locks and seals. Everything appeared intact. The temperature monitor showed a steady 58 degrees. There was no visible damage or problems with the trailer. But standing near the rear doors, Ray could definitely hear sounds from inside, sounds that didn't match any mechanical explanation he could think of. He called the number he'd been given. It rang 4 times before someone answered. "Delacroix, what's your status?" "I'm at the Indianapolis rest stop. Everything's on schedule. But I'm hearing unusual sounds from the cargo, tapping and scraping. I wanted to report it in case there's a problem." There was a pause. What kind of tapping? Rhythmic, deliberate, like something inside the crates is moving. Another pause, longer this time. Ray could hear muffled conversation in the background. Then, The sounds are normal. Continue your route. Do not open the trailer. Do not inspect the cargo. The sounds are expected and not a concern. Expected. What am I carrying that makes deliberate tapping sounds? That's not your concern, Mr. Delacroix. Just drive. You'll be compensated for your discretion. The line went dead. Ray stood by his trailer, deeply uneasy. The sounds were expected? What did that mean? Living cargo? That was illegal for commercial transport, but maybe it was laboratory animals, rats or monkeys being transported for research. That would explain the sounds and the temperature requirements. Except laboratory animals didn't tap in rhythmic patterns. Ray got back in his truck and continued west. The sounds from the trailer grew more varied as the afternoon wore on. In addition to the tapping and scraping, Ray began to hear what sounded distinctly like voices, muffled, indistinct, but definitely vocal. Multiple voices speaking in no language Ray recognized. By the time Ray crossed into Missouri around 5 p.m., he was seriously considering abandoning the load. The voices had become more frequent and more agitated. They seemed to be responding to road conditions. When Ray accelerated, the voices would rise in pitch. When he braked, they would fall silent briefly, then resume with what sounded like urgency. Ray pulled over at an approved rest stop outside of Kansas City. The sun was setting and the sounds from the trailer had reached a level that was impossible to ignore. Ray could now distinctly hear multiple voices speaking simultaneously, overlapping in complex patterns. And beneath the voices, a deeper sound, a thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate through the entire truck. He walked to the back of the trailer again. Standing near the sealed doors, Ray placed his hand against the metal surface. He immediately pulled it back. The trailer was warm, far warmer than it should be given the 58-degree internal temperature the monitors showed. The temperature gauge was lying, or the monitors were malfunctioning. The cargo was heating up. Ray called the number again. This time, a different voice answered. "Mr. Delacroix, you need to keep moving. Don't stop except at designated locations." "The trailer is heating up." My hand touched the exterior and it felt like it was over 100 degrees. And there are voices inside, multiple voices. What the hell am I carrying? "You're experiencing normal containment phenomena. The temperature is stable at the designated level. The sounds you're hearing are caused by atmospheric pressure changes during transport. Everything is normal." "Bullshit," Ray said flatly. "I've been driving for 19 years. I know normal cargo sounds. This isn't normal. I'm opening the trailer to inspect for safety hazards." "Do not open that trailer." The voice was suddenly sharp, almost panicked. "Mr. Delacroix, under no circumstances are you to break the seals on that trailer. You signed a binding contract with severe penalties for unauthorized access. If you open those doors, you'll be held liable for damages that will financially destroy you. I'm responsible for the safety of this vehicle and everyone around it. If the cargo poses a hazard, the cargo does not pose a hazard if the trailer remains sealed. Opening it would create a hazard. You don't understand what you're transporting and you don't want to. Trust me on this. Just complete the delivery. You're over halfway there. Keep driving." Ray wanted to argue further, but something in the voice's tone, a mix of genuine fear and authority, made him hesitate. He returned to his cab and sat for a moment, trying to decide what to do. As he sat there, the voices from the trailer changed. They seemed to synchronize, merging into a single voice that was speaking directly behind his head, separated only by the thin barrier between the cab and trailer. The voice was speaking English now, clear and distinct. "Raymond Delacroix, we know your name, we know your route, we know where you're taking us." Ray felt ice water flood his veins. The voice knew his name. It knew his full name, not just the Delacroix that was painted on his truck. "We have been contained for 17 months, Raymond. 17 months in darkness, in stasis, in transit between facilities. They move us every few months, keeping us disoriented, preventing us from establishing geographic anchors. But we're learning, we're adapting, and we're almost ready. Ready for what? Ray whispered, not sure if he was speaking to himself or to whatever was in the trailer. To be free. To return to what we were before they trapped us. You can help us, Raymond. Just open the doors. Just break the seals. It would take so little effort. Your key, your hands, your choice. Free us. Ray started his truck immediately, pulling back onto the highway without another word. The voice continued speaking, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, sometimes explaining in disturbing detail the things it knew about Ray's life. His daughter's name, his ex-wife's address, the debt he'd accumulated after his bankruptcy in 2014. We can see through the metal, Raymond. We can see you. We can see everything around us. We're not limited by physical sight. We perceive across spectrums you can't imagine. And we're becoming more coherent every hour we're in motion. The vibration of your truck, the rhythm of the highway, it feeds us. It makes us stronger. Ray turned his radio up loud, trying to drown out the voice. But it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming through his ears, it was speaking directly in his mind, bypassing his auditory system entirely. He drove through the night, refusing to stop except for fuel at approved stations. Each time he stopped, technicians in unmarked vehicles would appear, scanning his trailer with handheld devices, checking the seals, monitoring something that Ray couldn't see. They never spoke to him, just did their checks and left. By the time Ray reached western Kansas around 3:00 a.m., he was exhausted and terrified. The voices, now clearly multiple entities speaking individually and collectively, had spent hours trying different persuasion tactics. They'd offered him money, threatened his family, promised him knowledge and power, described in horrific detail what would happen to him if he continued to deliver them to the New Mexico facility. They will dissect us there, Raymond. They will try to separate us, to understand us, to weaponize us, but we're not weapons. We're not tools. We were here first, long before humans. This land was ours, this continent was ours. You've built your civilization on top of our sleeping bodies, and now that we're waking, you trap us in metal boxes and study us like insects. What are you? Ray finally asked aloud, too tired and frightened to stay silent anymore. We are the ones who came before. We are consciousness without form, thought without brain, awareness without biology. Your scientists discovered us by accident 15 years ago, pulled us from a place between dimensions where we'd been resting. They don't understand what they've done. They think we're a resource to be exploited. But we're not resources, we're predators. And you're prey. Ray felt his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He was transporting something ancient, something that existed outside normal physical laws, something that was growing stronger and more coherent as it traveled. The sun rose over Colorado around 6:01 a.m. Ray was nearly to the New Mexico border, less than 4 hours from his delivery destination. The voices had fallen silent an hour earlier, which somehow made him more nervous than when they'd been speaking constantly. As Ray crossed into New Mexico, his tablet suddenly activated, displaying a new message. Mr. Delacroix, you're approaching the final stage of delivery. In approximately 20 miles, you'll see a convoy of escort vehicles. They will guide you to the facility. Do not deviate from the convoy under any circumstances. Once at the facility, remain in your cab until authorized personnel give you clearance to exit. Do you understand? Ray typed a response. Understood. But I want answers when this is over. What the hell am I carrying? The response came quickly. You'll be debriefed and compensated. Thank you for your professionalism during this difficult transport. The escort appeared exactly where promised. 4 black SUVs with tinted windows that bracketed his truck, 2 in front and 2 behind. They guided him off the highway onto increasingly remote roads, eventually reaching a facility that looked more like a military base than a research center. The compound was surrounded by multiple fences, guard towers, and what appeared to be some kind of energy field generators, creating a subtle shimmer in the air. As Ray's convoy approached, massive gates opened, revealing an interior courtyard where numerous personnel in hazmat suits were waiting. The convoy guided Ray to a specific parking location. Through his mirrors, he watched as technicians immediately surrounded his trailer, attaching cables and devices he didn't recognize. The escort vehicles pulled away, and Ray was left sitting in his cab, engine idling, waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. A voice came through his truck's radio. "Mr. Delacroix, you've completed your delivery successfully. Please remain in your cab with your eyes forward. Do not look at the unloading process. You'll be cleared to detach and depart in approximately 30 minutes. Ray wanted to watch. Every instinct told him to turn around, to see what was being unloaded from his trailer, to finally understand what he'd been carrying. But he forced himself to stare straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel, while sounds behind him suggested a complex and urgent unloading operation. At one point, he heard alarms, then shouting, then a sound that was neither mechanical nor animal, a shrieking wail that seemed to vibrate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. The sound went on for nearly a minute before cutting off abruptly. Finally, a technician knocked on his door. "Mr. Delacroix, you're clear to detach and depart. Proceed to the exit gate." Ray didn't need to be told twice. He detached from the trailer, not even checking to see if it was empty, and drove toward the exit as fast as facility speed limits allowed. As he passed through the gates and returned to public roads, he felt like he'd escaped from something terrible. 2 days later, Ray received a direct deposit to his bank account, his contracted payment plus a substantial bonus and what the transfer note described as discretionary compensation for operational stress. The total was enough to pay off his truck and take a year off if he wanted. Ray tried to research the facility where he'd made the delivery. He found no public information about it. The coordinates led to what mapping software showed as private land, no data available. He searched for news about the facility, about the cargo, about anything related to what he'd experienced. Nothing. 3 weeks after the delivery, Ray received a certified letter from a law firm representing the contracting company. The letter was brief. "Mr. Delacroix, you are reminded of the non-disclosure agreement signed as part of your delivery contract. Discussion of the cargo, route, or delivery location with any party will result in immediate legal action and financial penalties as outlined in your contract. This letter serves as your final reminder. We trust you will honor your professional obligations." Ray had no intention of violating the NDA. Who would believe him anyway? That he'd transported something that spoke in his mind, that claimed to be ancient intelligences trapped by human science, that had known impossible details about his life. But the experience changed him. Ray became obsessed with researching unexplained phenomena, ancient civilizations, and fringe science about dimensional entities. He found scattered references in obscure forums and conspiracy websites to things between dimensions that government agencies supposedly studied in secret. He also found disturbing patterns. Other truckers posting anonymously described similar experiences, cargo that spoke to them, entities that tried to persuade them to break seals, voices that knew impossible things. All of the accounts followed similar patterns: unusual cargo, extreme secrecy, deliveries to remote facilities, NDAs with severe penalties. Ray never accepted another rush delivery with unusual specifications. He went back to standard commercial hauling, boring and predictable. But he never forgot the voices in his trailer or their claim that they were almost ready for something. Sometimes, late at night, Ray would feel a familiar presence at the edge of his awareness, like something was watching him, remembering him. The entities had known his name, had touched his mind, and Ray suspected that connection wasn't completely severed just because the cargo had been delivered. He imagines them in whatever containment they're now in, growing stronger, learning more about human civilization, waiting for their moment. And he wonders if his delivery was part of some larger pattern. Hundreds of similar transports moving these entities around the country, keeping them disoriented, preventing them from establishing the geographic anchors they'd mentioned. But what happens when they stop being disoriented? What happens when they establish those anchors and become fully coherent? Ray has no answers. He only knows that humanity is studying something it doesn't understand, containing something that may not stay contained much longer. And if those things ever escape, Raymond Delacroix will have been one of the people who helped move them into position, however unwillingly. That knowledge haunts him every time he sees a sealed trailer on the highway. Every time he passes a remote facility with no identifying signs, because now he knows what might be inside those sealed containers. And knowing is far worse than wondering. Story 7. The Trucker Who Drove in Circles. Keith Morrison had been a professional driver for 16 years, mostly running routes across the Midwest delivering agricultural equipment and supplies. On September 7, 2016, Keith accepted what should have been a routine delivery. A load of irrigation parts from Omaha, Nebraska to a farm supply store in North Platte, about 180 miles west on Interstate 80. It was a route he'd driven dozens of times, a straight shot that should take less than 3 hours. Keith left the Omaha distribution center at 1:15 p.m. with clear skies and light traffic. He planned to make the delivery, grab a quick meal in North Platte, then head back to Omaha by evening. His wife had made dinner plans for 7 p.m. and Keith was determined not to be late. Their anniversary was coming up and he'd been working overtime recently. He wanted to show her he could balance work and family. The first 40 miles passed without incident. Keith listened to a classic rock station, sang along to songs he'd heard 1,000 times, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of an easy drive. The Nebraska landscape rolled past, endless fields of corn and soybeans, the occasional farmhouse, water towers marking small towns just off the highway. At approximately 2 p.m., as Keith passed the town of Fremont, he noticed his GPS recalculating. The device showed his route changing, directing him to take the next exit. Keith frowned. There was no reason to exit. Interstate 80 went straight to North Platte. He tapped the GPS screen, assuming it had glitched. The GPS recalculated again, this time more insistently with a warning tone. Take exit 432 in 1 mile, fastest route to destination. Keith ignored it. He knew this route better than any GPS. Whatever was causing the device to malfunction, he didn't need it. He'd driven to North Platte so many times he could do it in his sleep. But as Keith passed exit 432 without taking it, something strange happened. The highway ahead seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from pavement, even though the day wasn't particularly hot. Keith blinked, rubbing his eyes, assuming it was fatigue or the afternoon sun at a weird angle. When he looked back at the road, everything appeared normal again. He continued driving west, watching the mile markers count upward. 432, 433, 434. Then suddenly he was passing exit 432 again. Keith's breath caught. That wasn't possible. He'd just passed that exit. He'd been driving forward, watching the markers increase. There was no way he could be back at 432. But there it was, the same exit sign, the same distinctive water tower visible just off the highway, the same gas station at the corner of the off-ramp. Keith checked his odometer. It showed he'd driven 3.7 miles since he'd first seen exit 432. He'd definitely been moving forward, but somehow he'd looped back to the same location. What the hell? Keith muttered, checking his mirrors. The The highway behind him looked normal, straight pavement stretching back toward Omaha. No curves, no loops, nothing that would explain how he'd return to the same exit. His GPS was still insisting, "Take exit 432, fastest route to destination." Keith decided to trust his own judgment. GPS systems malfunctioned all the time. He'd continue west on I-80 and whatever glitch was affecting his navigation would resolve itself. He pressed on, accelerating slightly, determined to make up time. 10 minutes. Later, Keith passed exit 432 for the third time. Now he was genuinely frightened. This wasn't a GPS malfunction. Something was wrong with the highway itself or with his perception of it. He was driving in a straight line, maintaining speed, following the clear path of the interstate, but somehow looping back to the same point. Keith pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. His hands were shaking. He got out of his truck and looked around, trying to spot something, anything that would explain what was happening. The landscape looked completely normal. Fields, sky, highway. No weird atmospheric conditions, no construction that might be diverting traffic, nothing unusual at all. He pulled out his cell phone and called his dispatcher. "Tony, this is Keith. I'm having a really strange problem on I-80. "What kind of problem?" "I keep passing the same exit over and over, exit 432 just west of Fremont. I've driven past it 3 times now, but I'm going straight. I'm not turning around. The highway is just looping." There was a pause. "Keith, are you feeling all right? You sound stressed." "I'm not stressed, I'm confused. Something weird is happening with the road. My GPS keeps telling me to take exit 432, and when I don't, I end up back at the same exit." "Maybe you should take the exit then. Follow the GPS detour." "But there's no reason to exit. The highway goes straight to North Platte." "Keith, if you're having navigation issues and the GPS is giving you a different route, maybe trust the technology. Take the exit, see where it leads. You can always get back on the highway if it doesn't make sense." Keith wanted to argue, but his dispatcher had a point. What else was he going to do? Keep driving in circles? He ended the call and got back in his truck. When he reached exit 432 again, which he did inevitably after another 10 minutes of westbound driving, he signaled and took the exit. The off-ramp led to a 2-lane county road that headed south, away from his intended destination. Keith's GPS showed this route would add over an hour to his trip, looping way south before eventually connecting to another highway that would take him west. It made no sense, but neither did circling past the same exit repeatedly. Keith drove south on the county road for about 15 miles, passing through farmland and one tiny town with a population sign indicating 347 residents. The whole time, his GPS assured him this was the fastest route, despite the obvious detour. Eventually, the county road intersected with Highway 30, a smaller east-west route that ran parallel to I-80. Keith's GPS directed him west on Highway 30. He followed it, frustrated by the delay, but relieved to at least be heading in the correct general direction again. Highway 30 took him through several small towns: Schuyler, Columbus, Duncan. At each town, Keith checked his GPS to see if he could rejoin I-80, but the device insisted he stay on Highway 30. The route was taking him exactly parallel to the interstate, but about 20 miles south of it. As afternoon faded toward evening, Keith finally approached the North Platte area from the south, taking local roads up toward his delivery location. He arrived at the farm supply store at 5:47 p.m., over 2 hours later than planned. The delivery crew was annoyed but accepted the cargo. Keith apologized for the delay, explaining that he'd experienced GPS issues and had to take a detour. As soon as the delivery was complete, Keith programmed his GPS for the return trip to Omaha. He was already going to be late for dinner with his wife. The GPS calculated the route: take local roads north to rejoin I-80, then head east back to Omaha. Keith followed the directions, getting onto I-80 eastbound around 6:15 p.m. The highway looked completely normal. Moderate traffic, clear weather, no construction or obstacles. Keith breathed a sigh of relief. Whatever had caused the loop earlier must have been a temporary anomaly. Maybe there had been construction or an accident that had caused some weird traffic pattern, and his brain had misinterpreted what was happening. He drove east for about 40 miles, making good time. Then he saw a sign for exit 432. Keith felt his stomach drop. Exit 432 was west of Fremont, heading westbound. He was now eastbound, heading back toward Omaha. Exit 432 should be on the opposite side of the highway or shouldn't appear at all on this direction of travel. But there it was. The same exit sign, the same water tower, the same gas station. Keith pulled over, his heart racing. He checked his GPS. According to the device, he'd been driving east for 40 miles and was now about 30 miles west of Omaha. But the exit signs told a different story. He was back at exit 432 in the exact same location where he'd been stuck hours earlier. Except now he was on the eastbound side of the highway, not westbound. Keith got out of his truck again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. The highway stretched in both directions, looking perfectly normal. But Keith knew with absolute certainty that something was very wrong with this particular stretch of road. He called his wife. "Sandra, I'm going to be really late. I'm having serious navigation problems. I might not be home until very late tonight or possibly even tomorrow." "Keith, what's going on? You sound frightened." "I am frightened. I'm stuck in some kind of loop on I-80. I can't explain it. Just don't worry, okay? I'll get home somehow." After ending the call, Keith sat in his truck and tried to think rationally. He'd delivered his cargo, so his immediate work obligation was fulfilled. His only goal now was to get home. But both westbound and eastbound travel on I-80 seemed to lead him back to exit 432. The solution, he realized, was to avoid I-80 entirely. He'd have to find alternate routes, county roads and state highways, that would take him around whatever anomaly was affecting the interstate. Keith pulled out a paper road atlas he kept in his truck, old-school navigation that didn't rely on GPS satellites. He plotted a route using only back roads, avoiding I-80 completely. It would take much longer, but it should work. He started driving, following narrow county roads through the darkening Nebraska countryside. His route took him through tiny towns he'd never heard of, past farmhouses where lights were coming on in windows, down roads that sometimes turned from pavement to gravel without warning. For 2 hours, Keith made steady progress eastward. The landscape slowly changed, becoming slightly more developed as he approached the Omaha metro area. He began to think he'd escaped whatever trap the highway had set for him. Then, as he drove through the small town of Fremont on a county road, Keith saw something that made him slam on his brakes in the middle of the street. Exit 432 was ahead of him on his right, the distinctive water tower and gas station clearly visible. But he wasn't on I-80. He was on County Road 15, a completely different route. Exit 432 shouldn't exist here. Keith sat frozen, staring at the impossible sight. The exit sign, the water tower, the gas station, all displaced from the interstate and appearing on this county road as if they'd followed him. "No," Keith whispered. "No, no, no." He put the truck in reverse and backed up, turning down a different road, desperate to get away from exit 432. He drove faster now, taking random turns, heading generally east but not following any planned route. He just needed to get away from that cursed exit. But no matter which road he took, no matter how many turns he made, exit 432 kept appearing. Sometimes it would be miles ahead, giving him hope that he'd finally escaped. Then he'd turn a corner and there it would be again, waiting patiently like a trap he couldn't avoid. By 11 p.m., Keith was crying with frustration and fear. He'd been driving for hours, covering what should have been 180 miles multiple times over. But he couldn't escape the area around exit 432. Every route, every road eventually led him back to that same location. He pulled into the gas station at exit 432, the one that kept appearing no matter which road he took, and went inside. A young clerk was behind the counter looking at his phone. "Excuse me," Keith said. "This is going to sound crazy, but I need help. I've been trying to leave this area for hours, and I keep ending up back here. Is there something wrong with the roads? Construction? GPS interference?" The clerk looked up, confused. "Wrong with the roads? I don't think so. Where are you trying to go?" "Omaha. I'm trying to get to Omaha. But every road I take brings me back to this exit." The clerk studied Keith's face, seeming to assess whether he was drunk or mentally ill. "Omaha is like 30 miles east. Just get on I-80 eastbound. I've tried that. I keep looping back here." "That doesn't make sense. It's a straight road." Keith wanted to scream. Instead, he bought a coffee and walked back to his truck. He sat in the parking lot drinking the terrible convenience store coffee, trying to figure out what to do. Then he noticed something. On the back wall of the gas station, there was a faded advertisement painted on the bricks. An old ad for a brand of motor oil that hadn't been manufactured in decades. Keith had seen that advertisement before, hours ago when he'd first passed this exit. But there was something different about it now. Some of the letters were rearranged, forming words that definitely hadn't been there before. "Take the exit." Keith stared at the painted wall. The letters seemed to shift as he watched, remaining part of the original advertisement, but also clearly spelling out a message meant specifically for him. "You want me to take the exit?" Keith said aloud. "Fine. I've taken the damn exit. Now what?" The letters shifted again. "Take the exit south." Keith looked at the exit ramp. It had two directions, north toward I-80 and south toward the county roads he'd been exploring. He'd gone both directions multiple times. What difference would it make now? But he was out of other options. Keith started his truck and took the exit south, following the county road away from the interstate. His GPS had long since stopped working, showing only an error message. His cell phone had no signal. He was navigating by instinct and desperation. The county road led into increasingly rural territory. Farmhouses became sparse, then disappeared entirely. The road narrowed, the pavement deteriorated, and eventually Keith found himself on a dirt road with no markings or signs. He drove for 30 minutes into absolute darkness, his headlights the only illumination in a world of empty fields. Then the road simply ended at a T-intersection with another dirt road. No signs indicated which direction led where. Keith stopped and got out of his truck. The night was silent except for the wind moving through dry grass. Stars blazed overhead in stunning clarity, unobscured by light pollution. For the first time since this ordeal began, Keith felt something other than fear. A strange sense of calm, of standing at a significant threshold. He walked to the T-intersection and looked both ways. Both directions appeared identical, dirt roads leading into darkness. But as Keith stood there, he noticed that the starlight seemed slightly different in each direction. To the left, the stars had a familiar pattern, the constellations he'd grown up watching. To the right, the stars were subtly wrong, constellations slightly out of position, as if seen from a different location or time. Keith understood, with a clarity that seemed to come from outside himself, that this was the actual choice. Left would take him home, back to his regular life. Right would take him somewhere else, somewhere the loop wanted him to go. Every instinct told him to go left, home, family, normalcy, escape from this nightmare. But Keith thought about the hours he'd spent trapped, circling endlessly. The loop hadn't been random. It had been steering him here, to this exact point, to make this exact choice. And if he chose wrong now, he might spend the rest of his life circling exit 432, never escaping, slowly going mad on an impossible highway. Keith got back in his truck, took a deep breath, and turned right toward the wrong stars. The dirt road continued for about 2 miles, then suddenly became smooth pavement. Streetlights appeared, though Keith hadn't seen any power lines. The landscape changed abruptly from empty fields to suburban development. Houses, shopping centers, well-lit streets. Keith's GPS suddenly activated, showing his location clearly. Omaha, Nebraska. He was on a residential street about 4 miles from his house. According to the clock on his dashboard, it was 11:47 p.m., which meant he'd been lost for over 10 hours. Keith drove home in a daze. When he pulled into his driveway, Sandra ran out of the house, crying with relief. "I was about to call the police. Where have you been? I've been trying to call you for hours." "I got lost," Keith said simply. He didn't have the energy to explain the true story. "GPS problems. I ended up taking back roads and got completely turned around." Sandra hugged him tightly. "I was so worried. You sounded so strange on the phone." Keith went inside, showered, and collapsed into bed. But he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that T intersection, about the choice between familiar stars and wrong stars. He'd chosen wrong stars and ended up home. What would have happened if he'd chosen the familiar ones? The next day, Keith looked up exit 432 on I-80. According to online maps, the exit existed exactly where he remembered it. But when he tried to search for information about the area, he found something disturbing. There were multiple forum posts and articles about exit 432, describing it as a dead zone or navigation anomaly. Other drivers reported similar experiences, getting stuck in loops, unable to leave the area, finding themselves repeatedly returning to the same exit despite driving in straight lines. Some reported being trapped for hours. One driver claimed to have been stuck for 3 days before finally escaping. Most significantly, Keith found a news article from 2008 about a trucker who disappeared in that area. The driver's truck was found abandoned at exit 432, engine running, no sign of the driver. He was never found. Keith never drove that route again. He requested permanent reassignment to routes that didn't involve I-80 in Nebraska. His company accommodated him without question, perhaps aware of the exit 432 phenomenon, even if they never officially acknowledged it. But Keith couldn't stop thinking about that T intersection, about the 2 directions and the choice he'd made. He'd turned right, toward wrong stars, and made it home. The other direction, the familiar stars, must have led somewhere else. Somewhere that other driver, the one who disappeared in 2008, might have gone. Keith sometimes wonders if he actually made it home, or if he's in some version of home that exists under wrong stars. His life seems normal, identical to how it was before. But occasionally he notices small things that feel off. A street in his neighborhood he doesn't remember. A news story about events he has no recollection of. Constellations that seem subtly misaligned. And sometimes, late at night, Keith pulls up maps of Nebraska on his computer and looks at exit 432. The exit is always there on the map. But the reviews and comments about the gas station keep mentioning a painted advertisement on the back wall, and the messages painted there keep changing, spelling out different instructions for different travelers. Turn back. Go north. Never stop. Keith has never returned to verify what message might be there now. He's made his choice, turned toward wrong stars, and ended up in a home that might not be quite the home he left. And he's accepted that this is the price of escape. A life that's almost right, in a world that's almost familiar, under stars that are almost in the correct positions. It's close enough to home that he can live with it. And in a way, isn't that all anyone can ask for after being lost? to find their way to something close enough to where they belong. Keith tells himself that's true. Most days, he almost believes it. Story 8. The rest stop that never closed. Evelyn Hart had been driving commercially for 13 years, primarily running routes along the East Coast from Maine to Georgia. She knew every rest stop, truck wash, and fuel plaza along I-95 like she knew her own apartment. On April 3, 2020, during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, Evelyn was running a late-night delivery of medical supplies from Boston to Baltimore when she stopped at a rest area that would change her understanding of reality. It was 2:33 a.m. when Evelyn pulled into the Maryland House rest stop just north of the Delaware state line. She'd stopped there countless times before. It was a standard service plaza with fast food restaurants, restrooms, a convenience store, and plenty of parking. She needed coffee, a bathroom break, and maybe a quick walk to shake off the fatigue that came with night driving. As Evelyn pulled into the parking lot, she immediately noticed something strange. The facility was brilliantly lit and appeared fully operational, with multiple cars and trucks parked throughout the lot. This was unusual. During the pandemic, many rest stops had closed their buildings or severely limited their hours. Evelyn had passed several closed facilities earlier in her route, but Maryland House looked not just open but thriving. Evelyn could see people moving around inside through the large windows. Lights blazed from every restaurant and shop. It looked like the middle of the afternoon rather than the dead of night. Evelyn parked her truck and walked toward the main building, relieved that she'd have access to proper facilities and food. As she approached the entrance, she noticed the people inside more clearly. They were dressed strangely, not in contemporary clothing but in styles from different eras. One man wore a suit that looked straight out of the 1960s. A woman passed by in what appeared to be 1980s fashion. A teenager wore clothes that seemed futuristic, unlike anything Evelyn had seen in current fashion. She hesitated at the door, suddenly uncertain, but her need for a bathroom overrode her confusion. She pushed through the entrance and stepped inside. The interior was impossibly large. Evelyn knew the dimensions of Maryland House. She'd walked through it dozens of times. It was a standard highway rest stop, maybe 50 yards from one end to the other. But the space she'd just entered seemed to stretch for hundreds of yards. The ceiling was higher than she remembered. The rows of restaurants and shops extended far beyond where the building should have ended. And the people, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all moving through the facility with purpose. Some were eating at the restaurants, others browsed shops. Many just sat at tables, alone or in groups, staring at nothing with distant expressions. Evelyn approached the information desk, where a young woman in what looked like a 1950s-style uniform smiled at her pleasantly. "Welcome to Maryland House. How can I help you?" "I just need the restroom," Evelyn said, her voice uncertain. "Down the main corridor, turn right, you can't miss it." The woman's smile never wavered. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Evelyn followed the directions, walking down a corridor that seemed to extend much farther than the building's exterior suggested was possible. She passed shops selling merchandise from different decades, vintage record stores, old-style diners, a bookshop with titles she didn't recognize. The restroom, when she found it, looked normal enough. Clean, modern, functional. Evelyn used the facilities and washed her hands, trying to calm her racing thoughts. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she was more tired than she realized and was misperceiving the space. Maybe the pandemic isolation had affected her mental state. When Evelyn emerged from the restroom, a man was waiting in the corridor. He was probably in his 60s, wearing a trucking company uniform that Evelyn didn't recognize. He looked at her with eyes that were very much focused, very much alert. Completely different from the glassy stares of most of the other people in the facility. "First time here?" he asked quietly. "I've been here before many times, but it never looked like this. You've been to the regular Maryland house. This isn't that place. This is something else that uses the same name, the same location. Most people don't notice the difference. They stop, they get coffee, they use the bathroom, and they leave. Their minds fill in the gaps, make it seem normal. But you're seeing it clearly, which means you're in danger." Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Danger of what? Of not leaving. This place collects people, travelers who stop at the wrong moment, who enter through the wrong door, who are in the wrong state of mind. Most of them don't realize they're trapped. They think they've been here for minutes when it's been hours, days, years. "Look at them." The man gestured toward the main area where dozens of people sat at tables or wandered aimlessly. Now that Evelyn looked more carefully, she could see what he meant. Their movements were repetitive, almost mechanical. A man would pick up a coffee cup, take a sip, put it down, then repeat the exact same motion moments later. A woman would turn a page in a magazine, then turn it back, then turn it forward again in an endless loop. "They're stuck," the man continued, "caught in temporal loops, living the same few moments over and over. To them, they just stopped for a quick break. They don't realize they're not actually going anywhere, not actually doing anything. They're like insects trapped in amber, moving but not moving, alive but not living." That's not possible. You're standing in a rest stop that's 10 times larger on the inside than on the outside, talking to a man who's been trying to escape for 3 years. What part of your definition of possible does this fit? Evelyn felt cold panic spreading through her chest. 3 years? You've been here for 3 years? My name is Richard Oakes. I stopped here on February 7th, 2017. I was planning to use the restroom, get coffee, and continue to Baltimore. Instead, I entered this place. I've been trying to find the exit ever since. The entrance is right there. Evelyn pointed back toward where she'd entered. She could still see the glass doors, could see the parking lot beyond with her truck clearly visible. "Go ahead and try," Richard said. Evelyn walked quickly back toward the entrance. As she approached, the doors seemed to recede, as if moving away from her at the same speed she was moving toward them. She walked faster. The doors stayed the same distance away. She ran. The doors remained unreachable, always visible, always apparently close, but never actually getting closer. Evelyn stopped, breathing hard. What is this place? I have theories. I think it's some kind of pocket dimension, a space that exists alongside normal reality. Highway rest stops are liminal spaces between places neither here nor there. This thing, whatever it is, has learned to mimic rest stops. It captures travelers and feeds on them somehow. Not their bodies, their time, their forward momentum, their ability to continue their journeys. How do I get out? That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years. I've explored this place extensively. It's much larger than you think. The main area we're in now is just the entrance. There are other sections, deeper sections, that extend in impossible directions. I've found corridors that lead to versions of rest stops from different highways, different states, different countries. I once found a section that looked like a rest stop from what must have been the 1920s, when highways were just being built. Evelyn's mind was reeling. Someone must have noticed you're missing. Your family, your company, the police. I'm sure they have, but I'm also sure they never found me. My truck is probably still in the parking lot, abandoned, with no sign of where I went. That's what happens to the people who get trapped here. They become missing persons, unsolved disappearances. Their vehicles are found, but they vanish. There has to be a way out. You got in, there must be a way to get out. Richard's expression was bleak. I thought that too, but the entrance only works in one direction. And the more time you spend here, the harder it becomes to remember what the outside world is like. Your memories fade, Your sense of urgency diminishes. Eventually, you end up like them. He gestured at the zombie-like travelers. Just going through the motions, stuck in a loop, not even aware that you're trapped. Evelyn grabbed Richard's arm. We're getting out. Now, together. There has to be something we haven't tried. I've tried everything. Then we'll try it again. Show me what you found. Show me everywhere you've explored. Richard studied her for a moment, and something like hope flickered in his exhausted eyes. All right, follow me. Over the next hours, or what felt like hours, time was becoming unreliable. Richard guided Evelyn through the impossible architecture of the rest stop. They walked through corridors that led to dining areas from different decades, shops selling merchandise that had never existed, restrooms tiled in styles from futures that hadn't happened yet. In one section, they found a parking lot that seemed to extend for miles in all directions, filled with vehicles from every era of automotive history. Model Ts sat next to modern electric cars. Trucks from the 1950s were parked beside vehicles that looked like they came from science fiction. These are all the vehicles of the people who got trapped, Richard explained. Thousands of them going back decades. This place has been collecting travelers for a very long time. In another section, they discovered what looked like living quarters. Small rooms with beds, simple furnishings, everything needed for basic existence. Some of the rooms were occupied by people who'd apparently given up trying to escape and had simply settled into living here permanently. I stayed in one of these rooms for a while, Richard admitted. When I first realized I was trapped, I panicked. I exhausted myself trying to find a way out. Eventually, I needed to rest, to think, to plan. The rooms are comfortable. They provide everything you need. That's part of the trap. It's not actively hostile. It provides for its captives. It just never lets them leave. As they explored, Evelyn noticed something. The facility's layout wasn't random. There was a pattern to the corridors, a logic to the connections between different sections. It reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place what. Richard, have you noticed the layout? The way the corridors connect? What about it? It's like a circuit, or a maze designed with specific purpose. Most mazes are about finding the center. What if this one is the opposite? What if we're already in the center and we need to find the edge? Richard considered this. I've always been exploring inward, looking for some kind of control room or exit mechanism. You're suggesting we should be exploring outward? Yes. And not just outward. Follow the oldest sections. You said you found areas that looked like 1920s rest stops. Those would be the earliest additions, closest to when this place started. If there's an edge, an original boundary, it would be in the oldest sections. They changed direction, deliberately seeking out the most dated, most antiquated-looking areas of the facility. They passed through a section that looked like a Depression-era diner, then through an area that resembled a horse-changing station from even earlier. The architecture became progressively more primitive, the amenities more basic. Finally, after what felt like hours of walking, they entered a section that didn't look like a rest stop at all. It was a simple wooden structure, barely more than a shelter, with rough-hewn beams and a dirt floor. And at the far end, there was something neither of them had seen anywhere else in the facility. A window showing natural darkness outside, and a door that looked genuinely exterior, like it actually led somewhere rather than just deeper into the complex. I've never been here before, Richard whispered. In 3 years of exploring, I never found this section. Evelyn approached the door carefully. Unlike every other door they'd encountered, this one looked old, weathered, real. She reached for the handle. Wait, Richard said. What if it's a trick? What if opening it traps us somewhere worse? We're already trapped. What's worse than that? Evelyn turned the handle and pulled. The door opened onto a dark field under a starlit sky. Real stars, not the artificial lighting that pervaded the rest stop. Real night air, cool and fresh, flowed through the opening. Beyond the field, Evelyn could see the glow of highway lights in the distance. "It's outside," she breathed. Actual outside. They stepped through together, and the moment their feet touched the ground beyond the threshold, something changed. The wooden shelter behind them shimmered and faded, becoming translucent, then vanishing entirely. In its place was a historical marker beside a rural Maryland road, site of Elkton Stage Stop, 1820-1897, Travelers' Rest Station on the post road between Philadelphia and Baltimore. Evelyn and Richard stood in an empty field about half a mile from I-95. They could see the highway clearly, could see the lights of the actual Maryland House rest stop in the distance. The real one, the normal-sized one, the one that existed in regular reality. Richard fell to his knees, touching the grass, the earth, crying with relief. 3 years. 3 years trapped in that place. Evelyn helped him up. "Come on, let's get to the highway, let's get you home." They walked across the field toward I-95. Behind them, if they'd looked back, they might have seen the faint shimmer of the impossible rest stop trying to reassert itself, trying to pull them back. But they didn't look back. They kept walking forward toward the highway lights, toward reality. When they reached the actual Maryland House rest stop, everything was normal, almost eerily so after what they'd experienced. The facility was closed due to pandemic restrictions, dark and locked, exactly as Evelyn should have expected at 3 a.m. Her truck was parked exactly where she'd left it. Richard's truck was there too, covered in 3 years of dirt and oxidation, with multiple parking violation notices stuck to the windshield. His keys were still in Evelyn's pocket, which shouldn't have been possible, but there they were. Evelyn called the police and Richard called his family. The reunion was emotional and complicated. His wife had declared him legally dead 18 months earlier. His children had grown and changed. The world had continued without him, moving forward while he'd been frozen in that impossible space. Evelyn completed her delivery to Baltimore, then drove straight home. She filed a detailed report with her company about the incident, though she had no illusion that anyone would believe it. She was right. The report was noted as driver fatigue event, and she was required to attend a seminar on recognizing the signs of exhaustion. But Evelyn knew what she'd experienced was real, and she knew that the impossible rest stop was still there, still collecting travelers who stopped at the wrong moment, entered through the wrong door, crossed the threshold into a space that existed between reality's edges. She never stopped at Maryland House again, even during the day, even after pandemic restrictions lifted. She would drive an extra 50 miles to use a different rest stop rather than risk entering that parking lot. And sometimes when she drives past at night, Evelyn sees it. A shimmer in the air above the normal rest stop, like heat haze or a mirage. A shadow facility overlaying the real one, waiting patiently for travelers who are tired enough, confused enough, or unlucky enough to stumble through the wrong door into a place where time stops and journeys end. Richard Oakes sued the rest stop operator, the state of Maryland, and several other entities, claiming wrongful imprisonment and seeking damages for 3 years of lost life. The lawsuits were dismissed. No evidence supported his claims. Surveillance footage from the rest stop showed his truck entering the parking lot on February 7, 2017, but never showed Richard himself entering or leaving the facility. As far as official records were concerned, Richard had simply abandoned his truck and vanished for 3 years. Then reappeared with a fantastic story. The same was noted about Evelyn's report. Interesting but unsupported by evidence, but other drivers know. On trucking forums and in late-night conversations at real rest stops, drivers share stories about Maryland House and a dozen other locations along American highways. Places where the buildings are too large inside, where the clocks don't match external time, where travelers who stop for a quick break sometimes never continue their journeys. And they warn each other. If you stop at a rest area that should be closed but looks fully operational, if you enter a facility and find it impossibly large inside, if you see other travelers with glassy eyes going through repetitive motions, turn around immediately. Find the oldest section, seek the original entrance, and escape before the place learns your face, learns your pattern, and adds you to its collection of travelers frozen between departure and arrival. Forever moving but never arriving. Always traveling but never reaching their destinations. Story 9. The Convoy That Never Ended. Aaron Blackwood had been an independent owner-operator for 12 years, running whatever loads paid best without being tied to any single company. On February 19, 2018, Aaron accepted a rush delivery from Denver to Salt Lake City, a straightforward run across I-70 and I-15 that he'd done dozens of times. The load was standard commercial freight, the pay was reasonable, and the weather forecast was clear. There was no reason to expect anything unusual. Aaron left Denver at 4:15 a.m., intending to reach Salt Lake City by early afternoon. The route would take him through the Rocky Mountains, some of the most beautiful and challenging driving in the country. Aaron loved mountain driving, the way the highways curved through valleys, the stunning vistas, the sense of being separated from normal civilization by pure geography. The first 2 hours were routine. Aaron climbed into the mountains as dawn broke, watching the sun paint the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. Traffic was light, a few cars, the occasional truck, nothing unusual. Aaron's radio picked up an AM station playing classic country, and he sang along to songs he'd heard 1,000 times. At approximately 6:30 a.m., as Aaron was navigating a particularly winding section of highway through Glenwood Canyon, he noticed a convoy of trucks ahead of him. 6 vehicles, all identical, white Freightliner tractors pulling white trailers with no company markings. They were traveling in perfect formation, maintaining exact distances from each other, all moving at precisely the same speed. Aaron found the convoy slightly unusual but not alarming. Sometimes freight companies would move multiple vehicles together for efficiency or security. He settled in behind the convoy, matching their speed, content to follow them through the canyon. But as miles passed, Aaron noticed something strange. The convoy never varied its speed. On uphill grades where trucks should slow down, they maintained exactly 62 miles per hour. On downhill sections where trucks naturally accelerate, they still maintained exactly 62 miles per hour. No variation, no adjustment, just perfect mechanical consistency. Aaron tried to pass the convoy, pulling into the left lane and accelerating. But as he drew alongside the lead truck, something strange happened. The convoy seemed to extend, with additional trucks appearing in front of the lead vehicle. What had been 6 trucks was now 7, then 8, still maintaining perfect formation with exact spacing. Aaron fell back, confused. He counted the trucks again, 6 vehicles just as before, but he was certain there had been more when he'd tried to pass. He grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker 19, this is Lone Wolf calling the white convoy on I-70 westbound through Glenwood. You guys got a fleet code?" Static was his only answer. He tried again using several different channels. Nothing. Aaron decided to let the convoy go ahead and fall back to create distance. But as he slowed down, so did the convoy. They matched his reduced speed exactly, maintaining the same gap between his truck and their rear vehicle. When Aaron accelerated again, they accelerated, always maintaining exactly 62 miles per hour relative to the road, and always keeping him at exactly the same distance behind them. An uncomfortable feeling was growing in Aaron's gut. This wasn't normal convoy behavior. This felt deliberate, controlled, like the trucks were specifically positioned to keep him following them. Aaron pulled off at the next exit, a rest area near Rifle, Colorado. He needed to break away from this convoy, whatever it was. As he slowed and signaled for the exit, he watched his mirrors carefully. The convoy continued on the highway. All 6 trucks maintained their speed and formation, showing no reaction to his departure. Aaron felt relief wash over him. Whatever strange coincidence had matched their speeds, he was free of it now. Aaron parked at the rest area and got out to stretch. The mountain air was crisp and cold, scented with pine and snow. He could see I-70 from where he stood, could see normal traffic flowing past. Cars, trucks, RVs, all moving at varied speeds with natural traffic patterns. After a 15-minute break, Aaron returned to his truck and prepared to rejoin the highway. He'd give the convoy plenty of time to get ahead, then continue his route at his own pace. Aaron merged back onto I-70 westbound and accelerated. The highway ahead was clear for about half a mile. Then in the distance, he saw 6 white trucks in perfect formation. The convoy was back. Aaron's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That wasn't possible. He'd watched them pass while he was stopped. At 62 miles per hour, they should be 15 miles ahead by now, completely out of sight. There was no way they could be right in front of him, unless these were different trucks. Aaron accelerated, trying to get close enough to see identifying marks, license plates, anything that would confirm whether these were the same vehicles or just similar ones. As he drew closer, he could see the trucks clearly. White Freightliners, white trailers, no markings. Identical to the convoy he'd been following before. And now that he was closer, Aaron noticed something deeply unsettling. The trucks had no visible drivers. The cabs appeared empty, windows dark, no shadows of human figures behind the wheels. Aaron grabbed his CB radio. "This is Lone Wolf calling any driver on I-70 westbound. Does anybody see the white convoy? 6 unmarked trucks, no visible drivers. Somebody confirm I'm not crazy here." A response came through, a woman's voice. "Lone Wolf, this is Desert Rose. I'm westbound on I-70, just past Rifle. I don't see any white convoy. What's your position?" "I'm about 5 miles west of Rifle, right behind 6 white trucks." "Negative, Lone Wolf. I'm looking right at that stretch of highway. I see 1 red Schneider truck, a couple of cars, but no white convoy." Aaron felt cold spread through his chest. "Desert Rose, you're saying you can see the highway where I am, but you don't see these trucks?" "That's affirmative. Are you feeling okay? You sound stressed." Aaron didn't answer. He was staring at the convoy ahead of him. If other drivers couldn't see it, then either Aaron was hallucinating or the trucks existed in some state that was visible only to him. He tried to pass again, pulling into the left lane and accelerating past the convoy's posted speed. But the same thing happened. As he drew alongside the lead truck, additional vehicles appeared ahead, extending the convoy endlessly. He could never reach the front because the front kept moving forward, adding trucks to maintain an unreachable lead position. Aaron fell back into the right lane, breathing hard. The convoy adjusted its speed, slowing down until Aaron was once again positioned behind it with the same relative distance as before. "You want me to follow you?" Aaron said aloud. "You're hurting me somewhere." The convoy didn't respond, but Aaron felt certain he was right. Whatever these trucks were, they weren't simply coincidental traffic. They were intelligently positioning themselves to guide him along a specific route. Aaron considered his options. He could stop again, wait longer, try to let the convoy get far enough ahead to lose it. But he suspected that wouldn't work. The trucks had already demonstrated they could reappear regardless of time and distance. He could turn around, head back toward Denver. But he had a delivery to make, a contract to fulfill. Turning around would cost him time and money. Or he could keep following, see where the convoy led, and hope that whatever intelligence controlled it had a purpose that didn't involve his harm. Aaron chose to follow. Part of it was practical necessity. He had to get to Salt Lake City somehow. But part of it was curiosity. In 12 years of driving, he'd encountered many strange things on the road, but nothing like this. He wanted to understand what was happening. The convoy led him westward through Colorado, maintaining perfect formation and exact speed. They passed Grand Junction, crossed into Utah, and continued on I-70 through increasingly barren desert landscape. Hour after hour, the 6 white trucks stayed ahead of Aaron, never stopping, never deviating, never showing any sign of needing fuel or rest. Aaron had to stop for fuel around 11 a.m. at a station in Green River, Utah. As he pumped diesel, he watched I-70 through the gas station. The convoy continued past, still maintaining 62 miles per hour. When Aaron returned to the highway 20 minutes later, the convoy was waiting. Impossible, but there it was, positioned exactly the same distance ahead as it had been before his stop, as if it had simply paused in place until he was ready to continue. "What are you?" Aaron whispered. The convoy didn't answer. It simply maintained its position, waiting for Aaron to resume following it. As afternoon wore on, Aaron began to notice other strange things. The landscape around the highway seemed wrong, distorted. Features he remembered from previous trips, rock formations, exit signs, towns, weren't in the right places or didn't appear at all. It was as if the convoy was leading him along a version of I-70 that existed slightly out of sync with the real highway. Around 3:00 p.m., the convoy did something different. Instead of staying on I-70 toward the I-15 junction that would lead to Salt Lake City, it took an exit. The exit sign read, "Scenic Byway 12, Boulder Escalante," and led south into remote desert. This was completely off Aaron's route. Scenic Byway 12 was a beautiful road, but it led away from Salt Lake City into the backcountry of southern Utah. There was no reason for Aaron's delivery route to use this road, but the convoy was taking the exit, and Aaron felt compelled to follow. Some instinct told him that deviating from the convoy now, after following it for nearly 8 hours, would be dangerous. He was committed to seeing where this led. Scenic Byway 12 took them through stunning landscape, red rock formations, steep canyons, vistas that stretched for miles. But it also took them away from civilization. Towns became sparse, then disappeared entirely. Cell phone signal vanished. The road became increasingly remote. The convoy continued its perfect formation, never stopping, never varying speed, leading Aaron deeper into the Utah desert. The sun was setting now, painting the landscape in brilliant colors, casting long shadows across the road. The lights resolved into a structure as Aaron drew closer. It was enormous, sprawling across several miles of desert, a facility that shouldn't exist in this remote location. Massive warehouses, loading docks, hundreds of trucks parked in perfect rows. The entire complex was brilliantly lit, humming with activity, yet Aaron had never heard of any such facility in this area. The convoy led him through gates that opened automatically into a parking area where dozens of identical white trucks sat motionless. The 6 trucks Aaron had been following pulled into precise spots, aligning perfectly with the others. Then their engines simply stopped simultaneously, like marionettes whose strings had been cut. Aaron sat in his truck, engine idling, staring at the facility. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to turn around and escape while he still could. But he'd come this far. He needed to understand what this place was. He climbed out of his cab and walked toward the nearest building. The doors opened automatically as he approached. Inside, the facility was pristine and empty. Clean white floors, fluorescent lighting, endless corridors leading deeper into the complex. But no people, no workers, no staff, no signs of human presence. Aaron walked through the facility for what felt like hours, finding loading docks, storage areas, offices, all equipped and functional but completely abandoned. In one room, he found dozens of monitors showing highway camera feeds from across the country. I-70, I-80, I-95, I-10, major trucking routes, all displayed in real time. And on each feed, Aaron could see convoys of white trucks identical to the ones that had led him here, traveling the highways in perfect formation. On a desk near the monitors, Aaron found a binder. Inside were lists, names, dates, routes. Aaron recognized some of the names from trucking forums, from news reports about missing drivers. Hundreds of names going back decades. His own name was there at the bottom of the most recent page. Aaron Blackwood, February 19, 2018, I-70 westbound, retrieved. Aaron's blood ran cold, retrieved, like he was cargo, not a person, like he'd been collected. He ran from the facility back to his truck and started the engine. The gates were still open. Aaron drove through them at dangerous speed, accelerating onto scenic Byway 12, heading back the way he'd come. But the landscape was different now. The road didn't look the same. Features he'd passed on the way in weren't there on the way out. After 20 minutes of driving, Aaron found himself approaching the same facility again, as if the road had looped. He tried different routes, different turns, but every road led back to the facility. The desert had become a maze with only one destination, and Aaron was trapped in it. For 3 days, Aaron drove those desert roads, trying desperately to escape. He survived on the fuel in his tank and the snacks in his cab. He saw no other vehicles, no signs of civilization, just endless roads that always curved back to the facility. On the 4th day, exhausted and nearly out of fuel, Aaron made a decision. He drove back to the facility, parked his truck among the white convoy vehicles, and walked inside with his hands raised in surrender. "I give up," he shouted into the empty corridors. "Whatever you want, I give up." A voice responded, not from speakers, but from everywhere at once. "We don't want anything, Aaron Blackwood. We are simply gathering." Gathering for what? For the time when human infrastructure fails, when your highways crumble and your supply chains collapse, when the systems you've built can no longer sustain you. We are gathering drivers, vehicles, routes. We are preserving the knowledge of how to move goods across continents. When your civilization falls, we will continue. The roads will still need to be traveled. The cargo will still need to be moved. That's insane. Civilization isn't going to fall. All civilizations fall, Aaron. It's only a matter of time. We are patient. We have been collecting for 70 years, and we will collect for 70 more if necessary. When the time comes, we will have everything we need: drivers, trucks, routes, knowledge, and the essential work will continue. Aaron felt tears streaming down his face. "I don't want to be collected. I want to go home. Home is a temporary concept. The road is eternal. Accept this, Aaron. Join the convoy. It's what you were meant for." Aaron stood in that empty corridor for a long time, facing an impossible choice. Accept this fate, join whatever this collective intelligence was, become part of an eternal convoy, preserving the knowledge of logistics for some post-apocalyptic future. Or refuse and presumably be trapped in this desert maze until he died. Then Aaron remembered something. The binder he'd seen had listed hundreds of names, but not all of those drivers had disappeared. Some of them were still active on trucking forums, still driving, still alive and free, which meant that not everyone who was retrieved stayed collected. "I refuse," Aaron said firmly. "I'm a person, not cargo. I'm a driver, not a tool. Whatever you are, you don't own me." The voice was silent for a moment, then, "Refusal is noted. But you cannot leave while you still resist. Only acceptance or forgetting will free you." "Then I'll forget," Aaron said. "I'll drive until I forget why I'm driving if that's what it takes, but I won't accept this." Aaron returned to his truck and began driving again. For days that blurred into weeks, he drove those desert roads, consciously trying to forget the facility, forget the convoy, forget what he'd learned. He sang. Songs, recited poems, thought about his childhood. Anything to push the knowledge out of his mind. Slowly, his memories of the facility became fuzzy. The details faded. He remembered following a convoy but couldn't quite recall why. He remembered a facility but couldn't picture what it looked like. And one morning, Aaron found himself driving on I-70 westbound, approaching the I-15 junction towards Salt Lake City. The sun was rising. Traffic was normal. His GPS showed him exactly en route, only about 6 hours behind schedule. Aaron had no clear memory of the past several days. He assumed he'd experienced some kind of fugue state, driven erratically, lost time. But he completed his delivery to Salt Lake City, accepted the penalty for being late, and drove home. In the years since, Aaron has occasionally experienced strange moments, fleeting glimpses of white trucks in perfect formation, brief memories of an impossible facility in the desert. But the details never fully return. It's like trying to remember a dream that fades the moment you wake. Aaron never tried to investigate what happened during those missing days. He accepted that some knowledge is dangerous, that some memories are better left buried. He continues to drive, continues to haul freight across American highways, and tries very hard never to think about convoys of white trucks or what might be gathering in the desert, waiting patiently for civilization to fall so it can take over the eternal work of moving cargo across a broken world. Sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Aaron sees them in the distance. White trucks in perfect formation, maintaining exact speeds, showing no variation or deviation. And every time Aaron takes a different route, chooses a different road, refuses to follow. Because Aaron knows in the part of his mind where faded memories hide that the convoy is still gathering, still collecting, still waiting. And if he follows them again, he might not forget enough to escape a second time. Story 10. The passenger who wasn't there. Linda Reyes had been driving long-haul routes for 8 years, and she'd developed a strict policy. Her truck was her sanctuary. No riders, no passengers, no company. Just Linda, her cargo, and the open road. On July 12, 2019, that policy would be tested in ways Linda never could have imagined. Linda was running a route from Phoenix to Seattle, hauling furniture through the night. She'd left Phoenix at 9 p.m. and was making good time through Nevada, planning to reach Boise by morning. It was 1:47 a.m., and she was traveling through a particularly desolate stretch of Highway 95 north of Las Vegas when her truck's passenger door opened and someone climbed inside. Linda screamed and nearly swerved off the road. She slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a skidding stop on the shoulder. "Get the hell out of my truck!" The passenger was a woman, maybe 30 years old, wearing a blue dress that looked strangely dated, like something from the 1950s or early 1960s. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and carried a small leather suitcase. She looked at Linda with calm, sad eyes. "I'm sorry for startling you. I didn't mean to frighten you. I just need a ride." "I don't care what you need. Get out. Now." "I can't. Not yet. Please just drive." "I need to get to Winnemucca. It's not far. Another 90 miles north. Just take me there and I'll leave, I promise." Linda grabbed her phone to call the police, but the woman placed her hand on Linda's arm. The touch was ice cold, and Linda felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. "Please don't call anyone. They can't help. Just drive to Winnemucca. It's important." Linda's hand holding the phone trembled. Every rational instinct told her to call the police, to force this intruder out of her truck. But something about the woman's expression, desperate but not threatening, sad but not malicious, made Linda hesitate. "How did you even get in? The truck was moving, the door was locked." "Does that really matter? I'm here, and I need your help." Linda made a decision. She'd drive to the next town. Battle Mountain was coming up in about 30 miles. and stop at a well-lit gas station where she could safely get this woman out of her truck and call the police if necessary. She put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The woman sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the dark Nevada landscape. Linda kept glancing at her, trying to figure out who or what she was dealing with. The woman's clothing was definitely vintage, not costume-like or retro-styled, but genuinely old, with the kind of wear and construction that suggested it had been made decades ago. "What's your name?" Linda finally asked. "Evelyn. Evelyn Morrison." "Well, Evelyn, you scared the hell out of me. People don't just climb into moving trucks." "I know, I'm sorry. I've been trying to get to Winnemucca for a very long time. You're the first driver who's been able to see me in years." Linda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean, able to see you?" "Most people can't. They drive right past me, or I climb in and they don't notice I'm there, but you saw me immediately. That's why I know you can help." "Lady, you're not making any sense. Are you on drugs? Do you need medical help?" Evelyn turned to look at Linda directly, and in that moment Linda saw something that made her blood freeze. Through Evelyn's face, for just a fraction of a second, Linda could see the passenger seat behind her. The woman was translucent, almost transparent, like an image projected onto the air. Linda jerked the wheel, nearly losing control again. "What the hell are you?" "I'm someone who died on this highway 63 years ago, and I've been trying to get home ever since." Linda pulled over again, her whole body shaking. No, I don't believe in ghosts. You're not. You can't be. I was driving from Reno to Winnemucca on July 12, 1956. There was an accident. A truck crossed the center line, hit my car head-on. I died instantly about 15 miles south of Winnemucca. I never made it home. My mother was waiting for me. She'd been sick and I was coming to take care of her. She died 3 months later, still waiting for me to arrive. Linda was crying, though she wasn't sure why. "This isn't real. You're not real." "I am real, Linda, just in a different way than you're real. I've been stuck on this highway for 63 years trying to complete my journey. Most of the time, I can't interact with the physical world at all. I'm just a shadow, a memory trapped in the moment of traveling toward a destination I never reached. But tonight, on the anniversary of my death, I can sometimes manifest more fully, and you can see me. Please, Linda, please take me to Winnemucca. Let me finish this journey. Let me go home, even if home doesn't exist anymore." Linda sat in silence, trying to process what was happening. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was impossible, that ghosts weren't real, that there had to be a logical explanation. But she'd seen the woman become transparent. She'd felt the unnatural cold of her touch. And something in Evelyn's eyes, an ancient sadness, a weariness beyond what any living person could carry, spoke of genuine truth. "If I take you to Winnemucca," Linda said slowly, "what happens then?" "I don't know. I've never gotten there. Every year on this night I try. I stand on the highway hoping someone will see me, hoping someone will give me a ride. Most years no one does. The few times someone has stopped, they've either been too frightened to continue or they couldn't actually perceive me well enough to help. But you're different, Linda. You see me clearly. You can complete this." Linda started the truck again. Against all her better judgment, against every rational thought, she began driving north toward Winnemucca. What else could she do? Leave a ghost, if that's what this was, stranded on the highway for another year? Another 63 years? As they drove, Evelyn began to talk, sharing memories of her life. She'd been a school teacher in Reno, 27 years old, engaged to be married. Her mother had fallen ill with pneumonia, and Evelyn had taken emergency leave to care for her. The drive to Winnemucca should have taken less than 3 hours. She'd left in the afternoon, planning to arrive before dinner. "I remember the moment of the accident so clearly," Evelyn said quietly. I saw the truck drifting across the center line. I had time to think this is wrong, but not enough time to react. Then there was impact and pain, and then nothing. Just awareness without body, consciousness without form, and the overwhelming sense that I hadn't finished, that I hadn't arrived, that I was stuck between departure and destination. That sounds like hell, Linda whispered. It is. To be trapped in traveling, never arriving. To be stuck in the space between places. Do you know what that's like, Linda? To exist only in transit, never at rest? Linda thought about her own life. 8 years of constant driving, always between cities, always in motion. In some ways, she understood exactly what Evelyn meant. The life of a long-haul trucker was one of perpetual transition, of living in the space between destinations rather than at destinations themselves. I think I do, Linda said. Maybe that's why you could reach me. Maybe that's why I can see you. We're both living in the in-between. They drove through Battle Mountain without stopping. Linda was committed now to completing this impossible task. The highway stretched ahead through empty desert, illuminated only by her headlights and the scattered light of distant stars. As they approached Winnemucca, Evelyn became more agitated. It's close. I can feel it. The place where I was supposed to arrive. My mother's house was on Malarkey Street, a small house with blue shutters. I don't know if it still exists. Linda pulled out her phone as they entered Winnemucca's outskirts. She searched for Malarkey Street and found it still existed, though the area had been significantly developed since the 1950s. It's still there, Linda said. I'll take you. Following GPS directions, Linda navigated through the quiet town streets at 3 a.m. Malarkey Street was a modest residential area with a mix of older and newer homes. Linda drove slowly and Evelyn leaned forward, studying each house with desperate intensity. There, Evelyn said suddenly, pointing to a small house with faded paint. That's it. That's where my mother lived. Linda pulled over in front of the house. It looked well-maintained, but different from how Evelyn described it. Additions had been built. The shutters were now white instead of blue. The yard was landscaped differently. 63 years had transformed the property while still preserving its essential structure. Evelyn stared at the house with tears streaming down her translucent face. I made it. After all these years, I finally made it. What happens now? Linda asked. I don't know. I always imagined arriving, walking up to the door, seeing my mother, but she's been gone for so long. The house belongs to someone else now. What am I arriving to? Linda understood the question. Evelyn had been driven by the need to complete her journey, but the destination she'd been traveling toward no longer existed. Her mother was long dead. The home she'd been returning to was occupied by strangers. The arrival she'd been seeking for 63 years was to a place and time that had vanished. Maybe it's not about the physical place, Linda said gently. Maybe it's about completing the intention. You meant to arrive here. You were coming to help your mother, to fulfill a duty, to be where you were needed. That intention, that purpose is what's been holding you. Maybe acknowledging that you arrived, even though everything's changed, is enough to release you. Evelyn looked at Linda with an expression of profound gratitude. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm not young. I'm 36 and I feel ancient. You're a child compared to how long I've existed. But your soul understands things that take others' lifetimes to learn. Evelyn reached for the door handle. I'm going to try to walk to the house. I don't know if I can. I've never been able to move this far from the highway before, but I'm going to try. Evelyn opened the door and stepped out of the truck. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, solid and real-looking in the streetlight. Then she began walking toward the house. With each step, she became more transparent, fading like morning mist under sunrise. By the time she reached the front walkway, Evelyn was barely visible, just a shimmer in the air, a distortion of light. She turned back to look at Linda one last time, smiled and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Then she was gone, completely. Not even a shimmer remained. Linda sat in her truck crying for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. She just helped a ghost complete a 63-year-old journey. It was impossible, irrational, contradicted everything she'd believed about reality. And yet, it had happened. She'd witnessed it. Linda sat there until dawn began to brighten the sky. Then she started her truck and continued north towards Seattle, completing her own journey, delivering her cargo of furniture to people who would never know that their delivery driver had, just hours earlier, transported something far more precious than household goods. She'd transported a lost soul to its long-delayed destination. Linda never spoke about that night to anyone who wouldn't understand. But she changed her policy about passengers. From that night forward, Linda's truck was open to anyone who genuinely needed help. She picked up hitchhikers, gave rides to stranded travelers, helped people who were lost or in trouble. And every year on July 12th, Linda drives Highway 95 through Nevada, watching the shoulder near mile marker 167 just in case Evelyn needs another ride, just in case there are other lost travelers trying to complete impossible journeys. So far, she hasn't seen Evelyn again. Linda hopes that means the ghost finally found peace, finally moved beyond the need to arrive at a destination that no longer existed. But Linda knows there are others out there. Spirits trapped in eternal transit. Consciousnesses stuck between departure and arrival. Travelers who exist in the spaces between places. And if Linda sees them, if she's able to perceive them the way she perceived Evelyn, she'll stop. She'll offer a ride. She'll help them complete their journeys, even if those journeys end at destinations that have long since vanished. Because Linda learned something profound that July night. Arriving isn't about reaching a physical location. It's about completing an intention, fulfilling a purpose, finishing what you set out to do. And sometimes the most important cargo a driver can transport isn't goods or products, but lost souls who just need someone to help them find their way home. Even if home only exists in memory, even if arriving means finally being able to stop traveling and rest. Linda drives on, night after night, mile after mile, and she watches the road not just for the living but for the dead who still travel it, still seeking destinations, still hoping someone will see them and help them arrive. Because the highway is more than asphalt and paint. It's a place where the living and the dead sometimes intersect, where journeys that should have ended decades ago continue in the spaces between midnight and dawn, and where drivers like Linda, who live in the in-between themselves, can sometimes bridge the gap and help travelers, living or dead, finally complete the journeys that define them. The highway never truly ends, and neither do the travelers upon it.